2021 meeting to order. This meeting is being held remotely as an alternative means of public access pursuant to an order issued by the Governor of Massachusetts dated March 12, 2020, suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be recorded by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Laws, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. I will advise you all that it has been the practice of the advisory committee to record all of our meetings this year, and they are available for viewing on the Harbor Media YouTube site. So having said that, is there anyone who is on the call who is independently recording the meeting? If so, please identify yourself, my name and street address, and direct your comments to me as the chair. I'm not seeing any hands raised, either virtually or on the photos. So we will assume that no one else is making a recording. And that brings us to the second item on our agenda, which is an invitation for comments from the public on items that are not on the agenda. Items that are on the agenda, the public will have an opportunity to weigh in later on. So is there any member of the public that has a comment that they'd like to make on something not on the agenda? If so, please use the raise hand function and identify yourself by name and street address and direct your comments to me as the chair. I am not seeing any virtual hands raised or people waving madly on their screen. So I will assume there are none. That brings us to our next agenda item, which is Article N, design and construction bids for the public safety facility. And Nancy McDonald is our liaison. And I understand that our former chair, mentor to many of us, Donna Smallwood, is going to lead the charge on behalf of the proponents. Welcome back, Donna. And
thank you, Bob.
Go ahead, Nancy or Donna, who's ever going to lead off?
I'll start. As we discussed the majority of this last week, and I'm thrilled to have Donna here representing the Public Safety Building Committee. I wanted to point out that there is a change to the recommended motion from last week. So last week we talked about the fact that the recommended motion was recommending the design documents, to go forward with the design documents phase of the project. And at that point, there were still outstanding, or the bids were being reviewed, still reviewed for the owner's project manager. And you might recall that in past projects, the town engineer has served as an OPM on projects similar to this, but with the new town engineer, the request is for a third party OPM in the case for this project. Those bids have come in, and Donna can speak much more eloquently as I then about that. But that OPM is an additional cost above the cost for Castle Booze, who is the company that's been proposed to do the design documents. which would take us above the use of the 1.25 restricted funds that we discussed last week from the Hersey House. So the recommended motion is to appropriate an additional $400,000, up to $400,000 for the services of that OPM. But before we get into the details, I did want to comment on the fact that the appropriation is to cover the OPM for the life of the project, however long the project would go through. If town meeting continues to support this project, it would be through the construction phase. It's estimated that about 80% of those costs would be incurred during the construction phase. So only about 20% of those would be anticipated in this design phase. So that $400 is an appropriation of fund balance, but the expenses will be paid as they're incurred. And the expectation would be that for this coming year, that would be about 20%, so about $80,000 would be the pull from fund balance. With that, it is my pleasure to turn the conversation over to Donna Smallwood. It is wonderful. I wish we were on the horseshoes. I could invite you back to the horseshoe, but here we are. So.
Thank you very much. I'm Donna Smallwood from 32 Brewster Road. Garrity from the Public Safety Facility Building Committee sends his regards and his regrets. Our committee is meeting at the same time that yours is. And while Bob does many things well, he has not yet perfected being two places at once. So I am here to talk about the critical public safety facility that we have been talking about now for some time. I'm hoping to answer questions and gain your support. As you know, we've been, as a town, working to address the inadequacy, particularly of the North Fire Station, for over 5 years now. And town meeting has acknowledged the need to address certainly the fire station and now the police station with approval of feasibility money on several occasions, both before we located the property at Lincoln Street and then with the purchase of the agreement to purchase Lincoln Street last fall. As Nancy said, the request for funding, for which we seek your support tonight, is for a total of $1.6 million that would be spent as follows. 1.2 million would be spent for additional design development, and up to 400,000 would be spent for an owner's project manager. Let me talk a little bit about
Donna, before you go on, isn't it $1,250,000 plus 400?
No, that's the
No, that's the funding, Bob.
that's the funding,
source, not the amount.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you for that clarification. Design development is the next phase of this project. What the committee was tasked with doing earlier was a schematic design to figure out feasibility. Should we buy this property? Will it work for us? Is it big enough? Are there any surprises in the soils that would say we shouldn't buy it? Can we make the transportation work? That's the level of understanding of the project that we have so far. In the design development stage, this is when we really work in detail. We look for efficiencies. J.R. Frey, our town engineer, wouldn't say this, but as a citizen, I would say this is the point, this is the phase in which we right-size this project. We figure out what the needs are, we figure out what the resources are, and we look to make the project the appropriate size, scale, and cost for our community. We also get a much better handle on the project's cost. So that, and the current schedule, anticipated schedule is that between town meeting this year and annual town meeting next year, we work intensively on this design development, and we would be in a position at the annual town meeting in 2022 to then come back to the community and ask for funding for construction documents. And at that point, we should have a much better handle on the project size and cost. And it's a logical next decision point for our community about this project. So that's the short version of what happens during design development. As Nancy described, the owner's project manager is the technical eyes and ears for the town. They will, on behalf of the town, their client is the town. They are working on our behalf to oversee all the work that the designers do. They do some independent analysis of the designer's work to make sure that as a community, our goals are being met, and that the project is being done appropriately from a technical point of view. And I will just say personally, as a volunteer on the building committee, the fact that we are going to have professional staff overseeing the work of the designers, who I think very highly of, makes me a whole lot more comfortable in terms of how this project will go forward. I think you know from a previous discussion that an owner's project manager is required for a project of this size under state law. And I, for one, am delighted that we anticipate that it will be a third party firm. We are in the process of procurement for those services. I happen to be on the subcommittee that is working on that procurement, it has some weeks to continue to play out, but we are close to having those services available. As we get to the point of discussing where this $1.6 million is going to come from, I'd like to tag team Tom Mayo and ask Tom to provide that piece of the puzzle.
Great. Thank you, Donna. Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me. Pretty simple breakdown, really. Like Donna said, we have $1.6 million in expenses. The way we would fund that $1.6 million is through the $1.25 million available from the Hersey House proceeds. That would leave approximately $350,000 required from fund balance. That's a small enough number that historically we had borrowed from, we had used fund balance for in the past, consistent with past practice. I did speak with town council. I know there was some question about the legitimacy of the use of these funds. I did speak with council. I'm just going to read you a statement that that he was comfortable with. He has, John Coughlin, has determined that the proceeds from the sale of the Hersey House are available for use for this purpose, contingent on prior authorization from town meeting. Our intent would be to roll this authorization into the article. We believe that because the senior center and the police department are directly impacted by the funding of the article as a required step towards building a new police department, use of these funds for this purpose is in keeping with the original intent of these funds for remodeling town hall and the senior center. So there's a tie there, a relation to it. That was some of the sense that we had. So again, 1.25 from the Hersey House proceeds, but the balance about 350,000 coming from fund balance. That's all.
Anything further, Nancy?
No, as I said, I think for me at least, one of the important parts was that this is an appropriation, and the appropriation will be spent as the expenses come in, which is expected to be a subset of the total expense for the OPM.
That's exactly right, Nancy. Yeah.
Is there further discussion or comment from members of the advisory committee? If you can use the raise the hand function, that would be great. Victor?
Victor, you're on mute.
Sorry about that. I knew I was too. So Bob, two things. So the recommended motion, I guess, going back to your question, is actually asking for $1,650,000, right? So I'm assuming where, Nancy, you would be modifying that motion,
Yes, I will modify that number.
and then
I took that, right, sorry.
I mean, Bob, I do have a few comments on the comment or suggestions. I don't know that you want to take those now, but I want to raise that.
Well, anything substantive, I think, go ahead. Anything we can leave to our skillful editors.
All right, two points then. Nancy, where you do say that opponents of the article should delay all believe, etc. Did you speak to opponents? I mean, do you know that that's accurate, or are there opponents that have spoken here?
I have talked to a number of people in town, but that particular sentiment was really driven by the conversation of the overall public safety facility that was had at the town meeting in June.
All right. I mean, I just suggest you. Okay. I mean,
You mean the
I
special
wonder
town-
whether that's. A
I'm
current
sorry, October. Yes, Julie,
Right.
thank you.
Right.
The other comment, and just quickly, since it's a mix of procedural and I guess substantive, I think it's helpful to the town meeting, the reader of the warrant, if you lead with what the request is in terms of the total amount. And if you didn't want to do that at the very beginning of this, I would recommend that you at least do it in your paragraph where it says the advisory committee recommends funding. I would suggest spelling out what those amounts are right in that first
Okay.
sentence.
Yeah, I thank you, Victor. I can add those. The first paragraph was a little wordy, but you're probably right that that's the most appropriate place for it. So I'll work it into that.
That's it. Thanks,
All right,
Bob.
thank you. George Dennis?
Excuse me. Thank you, Bob. Yeah, I'm just curious as to why we are encumbering the entire OPM's cost when we're only expecting to spend 20% in this phase of the project.
Want me to take that, Bob?
Yeah, Tom, could you have the answer to that?
Oh, Nancy, I'm sorry, I'm jumping on you.
No, go ahead.
Okay.
I would say what you told me. So
Sometimes I forget my protocol in different board meetings. I apologize. Thank you for the question, Joe. I would say that, George, the main answer is, in order to do otherwise would require two procurements and potentially result in two different OPMs, which would be unhelpful in the construction phase. So we would have to, if we were to do one procurement now for 20% of the cost, we would have to do a whole separate procurement for the remainder of the cost, and that could result in two different winning bidders. And we wouldn't want that to happen.
Okay.
You all set, George?
Yeah. So customarily that we would encumber the entire amount of an OPM for, say, if we did Foster or when we did East. This would be standard practice.
Yeah, I can't speak to that. I wasn't here.
I do know from a previous conversation, George, that the OPM is baked into the MSBA process.
Right.
So that encumbrance is probably driven by a totally different
Okay.
issue
All
than.
right. That's fair. Thank you.
Libby?
I just wondered if, is there any benefit in identifying when some of these costs would be laid out? I know you mentioned that, Nancy, about, or I don't know if it was Donna or you, Nancy, that mentioned that you know, maybe only $80,000 would be used in that first period of time. I guess
That's in the comment.
I asked the question more unless I missed it. Let me see.
It's in the comment, Libby, in the second to last paragraph of the comment. I tried to spell that out. I can make that stronger if you'd like.
So you just indicated the 20%, but you didn't quantify anything.
Oh, you just want me to add a dollar figure to that? Okay.
Well, I mean, the 20%, are we saying the OPM piece is just the $400,000?
So the OPM piece is $400,000. There's the delta of the $50,000 from the Hersey
Yep.
house.
Yeah, no, I got that. I guess I heard you give that breakout, but I guess maybe to Victor's point, I don't see some of those dollar amounts in the actual comment other
Okay,
than
I can add those in.
the recommendation.
Yep, I can add those in. I don't, on that 20%, and we can talk about this, or, you know, offline, I can pose it different ways to the committee, but I mean, that is an approximation, so I don't want to also put a number out here that, you know, I mean, that would be, a typical would be 20%. So
Yeah.
typically it would be the $80,000 minus the 50, the appropriation. I mean, the actual expenditures could actually only be 30,000, but I think we should stick with probably the $80,000 number.
Yeah, or however you choose to draft that. I just
Okay.
think because the dollar amounts referenced in the comment for any of the components, as Victor, you know, brought up, just in having it only in the recommendation, I think leaves out an important piece of information. That's
Okay.
it.
I'm not seeing any other hands from advisory committee members. We have a lot of people on the call tonight. So Andy. Andy, you're on mute. Oh, there you go.
I may have missed this, but why, Nancy, does the last paragraph express the views of the opponents? If this is the advisory committee comment, I would see if there's a minority view of the advisory committee, I could see that in the comment, but not knowing who the opponents are, I don't know why the comment is containing what may or may not be the view of.
You are a fickle group. I believe on the first round of the comments last year, I did not have an opposing view and was told to asked to add it by the committee. So I think I was going under the guidance of last year's advisory committee. If this year's advisory committee thinks otherwise, I'm happy to remove it.
I would suggest that the paragraph should be the
I
board
see you
of
smiling, Alan.
sorry,
Never mind. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Andy.
the board of selectmen, who are the proponents, believe that using the restricted and unrestricted fund balance and just the rest of that first sentence, and then just delete the second sentence.
Okay.
Well, I think,
I mean, last year, I think there was active opposition and comments had been raised. Maybe that's the case now too. So that's, I think, why we put it in last go round. Whereas
Right, and
here,
I'm still, I guess I'm still reacting to the comments at October town meeting, but
maybe there are, I mean, if there are active comments, active opponents, and we're aware of their opposition, I think it is fair to put it in. I would disagree with Andy on that, but I wouldn't just, if opposition is not current or we're not aware of current opposition, my suggestion would be not to have it in there.
okay.
why don't we see how the rest of the discussion goes?
Yeah, good point.
After members of the public or other town boards are permitted to speak. And I do think when we have seen an opposition in the past, that we have tried to inform the citizens of at least the general nature of that opposition. So is there anyone else from the advisory committee that has a comment or question? I'm not seeing any hands at this point. So next, I think I'd open it up to members of other town boards or committees. If there's any member of a town board or committee here that would like to speak on this article, please raise your hand, identify yourself by name and street address, and direct your questions to the chair. I am not seeing any hands raised. So we'll open it up to the general public. Are there any members of the general public that would like to make a comment or ask a question on this? If so, again, please identify yourself by name and street address and direct your question or comment to the chair. People should use the raise hand function. Okay, Mr. Brad Carr.
Yeah, Brad Carr, 2 Tupelo Drive. I'm just curious on the OPM and the appropriation of the full amount. Is there governance or oversight on that such that there's that minimizes the risk of overspending in the design phase?
Tom or Donna or Nancy, do you want to take that?
I'm happy to, if that would help.
Go ahead.
So we can, Mr. Carr, thank you for the question. We could only spend to the appropriation, and the way we spend money from an appropriation is based on an invoice. So these folks would be working on our behalf. They would be invoicing us for work that they do based on a scope of work and a contract. And provided that the work done was done within the contract scope, we would pay that that amount. And J.R. Fry is actually on the line. J.R., you may want to jump in regarding your role in working with the OPM throughout, just to make sure, as Mr. Carr points out, that we don't get some rogue billing.
Right. So we'll be working with the OPM and overseeing the OPM in terms of their work and their progress as they are also kind of managing that project on behalf of the town, doing a lot of the cost checks against anything that KBA is presenting, and also they'll be working on finding efficiencies and really pushing KBA hard in that respect. So, but we're going to be working right on top of them, and we'll have a very close understanding of the level of effort that they are bringing to the table on a monthly basis. So, and all of that effort is going to be actually present, because a lot of it is going to be presented at the public safety facility building committees. So there's going to be a live forum where a lot of these issues are going to be demonstrated and hashed out to everyone's best interest.
Does that provide your answer, Mr. Carr? Nancy, you want to add something?
I just wanted to say, and JR, correct me if this has changed, but on a past building committee that I sat on, the building committee also votes or approves the invoices as they go through. So the building committee does serve as oversight as well of individual invoices.
I believe that is the intent for this building committee as well, yes.
Greg
Yes,
Corbett?
thank you.
Hi, Greg Corbett, 70 Winter Street. A quick question. This item was on the selectmen's meeting earlier this week, and there was a discussion about timing, one with respect to the Foster School building project, and then a separate point that I think Mr. Mayor raised, that if this project were to be delayed by a certain amount, that it would increase the overall cost of the project. So I'm curious to hear either from Mr. Mayor or from others how a potential delay on the design and construction would affect the overall cost of the project. A, and then B, what the timing is with respect to the Foster School building project? Thanks.
Who wants to take that one?
I'm happy to if you'd like.
Go ahead, Tom.
Donna might have some good information as well.
Tom, why don't you go-
Why don't I start? And Mr. Corbett, you're absolutely right. I did make that comment the other night. You know what? I was referring generally to, I've never seen a municipal project get cheaper with time. Wait, just inflation being what it is, the projects are going to get more expensive over time. So that was a general comment, kind of just as we were discussing the end of the project, the end of that discussion.
Donna, do you want to supplement that?
I would second that. My experience is that things get more expensive over time. That's been the town's experience, I think, fairly regularly, unfortunately.
There's not like there's not an escalation clause or a timing clause that would trigger the pricing or anything.
No, not a specifically built-in one, no. Did you ask me to explain the timing? Did you want me to go over that, or are you good with that?
Just briefly, thank you.
Sure. So the intent would be that we would go this April, or excuse me, April, what would have been April normally, this May to this annual town meeting for this approval of the design funds. And if successful there, we would design the building, come back at next annual town meeting with a request for construction document cost money. And then we would build the construction documents to such a point that we were able to make a reasonable estimate on the cost of what the building would cost based on the new design, and then go to the fall town meeting with the Foster School to ask for construction funds at that same, probably November-ish of 22 fall special town meeting.
Any other members of the public that want to raise a comment or question? I'm not seeing any virtual or actual hands. Are members of the advisory committee prepared to vote now? All right, is Nancy, you want to make the motion?
Absolutely. Put it down, sorry. So it's recommended that the town authorize the use of $1,250,000 of restricted fund balance from the proceeds of the sale of the Hersey House, and up to $350,000 from unrestricted fund balance to pay the expenses for design, architectural, engineering, owner's project manager, and other professional services to complete the schematic design and design development documents for a new public safety facility to be located at 335 Lincoln Street, Hingham, Massachusetts, or act on anything relating thereto.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, then we come to vote. Libby,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Victor.
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Eveline,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
Alan,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Evan.
Aye.
And we've got a lot of people on the call tonight. Is there anyone I missed?
Andy?
And
Aye.
Andy. Thank
Andy,
you.
aye.
Thank you. I think that's everybody then. Is that 14-0?
I don't see Tina, Bob, so I don't think she's here.
Oh, okay. You are right.
So 13-0-0.
13-0-0. Thank you. Okay. Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, JR. A lot of work's gone into this and it's most appreciated. So
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
will bring us to our next agenda item, which is Article O, the Climate Action Planning Study. I think Brenda, you'll be our presenter. And I would like to say before you start that the advisory committee has probably received between, I would estimate 12 and 20 pieces of correspondence from citizens, all favoring this article. And they've been distributed to everybody. So Brenda, go ahead.
Right. I'm introducing Articles O and at least the beginning of P, because these articles ask the town to commit to a climate action planning process to guide the town in reducing carbon emissions across all sectors of the town to reach net zero, a zero sum of carbon emitted and carbon absorbed by 2040 or another feasible date, and propose the creation of a climate action planning committee to develop that plan. The background is that those on AdCom last year know that the Energy Action Committee proposed a climate action planning process for the warrant last year. During the hearing process at the Board of Selectmen and AdCom, it was determined that the plan needed further development and town residents needed more education and socialization about climate action planning before taking it to town meeting. So a climate action task force was appointed by town administration and was convened in the fall of 2020 to accomplish those tasks. I really want to thank the members of the task force who've worked incredibly hard over a fairly short period of time to look at a great deal of information about how other towns have tackled this process. If you go to the webpage for the Climate Action Planning Group Task Force, you'll see the number of documents that they have worked their way through to get to this point. So the warrant articles O and P are the outcome of that task force work, and it was accomplished with the help of a consultant from Massachusetts, Metropolitan Area Planning Council, who was paid by money, $3,000 contributed by the planning department through Mary Savage Dunham. Brad Moyer, chair of the task force, Kathy Reardon and Maria Zaid, task force members, and Brooks Winter, the consultant from MAPC, are here tonight to help us understand the work that they completed and the warrant articles evolving from that work. As most of you are likely aware, the draft Hingham Master Plan calls for a goal of protecting the environment and preparing for the impacts of climate change, and lists specifically that the town needs policies to set goals to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050 and to reduce energy and water consumption by residents, businesses, and town government. So this task force, the climate action planning process certainly would approach addressing those. So I want to call to your attention that the original article, or the Article O, asks the town to authorize funds for a climate action planning process. In the last week, we found out that Hingham Municipal Light Plant has committed to providing $80,000, the needed funds for the scope of work that is being proposed. So at this point, the question going to town meeting will be, does the town authorize the use of that $80,000 provided by Hingham Light Plant to create a climate action plan for the town with a net zero emissions goal? AdCom members today received a copy of the draft scope of work, which details the expected use of those funds for professional consultant help in developing the plan. You should also be aware that the Board of Selectmen voted unanimously in support of this article. Alan, my colleague, will present Article P, which asks the town to create a committee that will undertake the work of creating an climate action plan. I want to turn this over to Brad Moyer, the chair of the task force, to kind of present the work that the task force has done leading to these articles. But I wanted to ask you, Bob, do you want sort of O and P to be talked about together or separately?
No, I think we ought to talk about them separately, because in the probably unlikely event that there is not favorable action on O, it would have an effect on P. But I mean, I'm sensing great support for O, but let's separate them out and take them one at a time. Brad, you want to go ahead?
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So Brad Moyer, 23 Colonial Road, member of the task force and chair of the Energy Action Committee, though of course I'm here in my capacity as a member of the task force this evening. Thank you, Brenda, for that introduction and all the hard work you have done, and Alan, you as well. And my thanks to the advisory committee for their patience with us. I know we were hoping to perhaps discuss these articles at an earlier date, but it was the funding issue that was tying us up. But I think our patience paid off, as we've come to a very good resolution in that regard. So I'll describe in brief the history of the work of the task force in getting to this point. Because of course, Article O and P have that shared history, I'll be addressing both at that time, but then we can go into the particulars of O. So as Brenda had noted, the Energy Action Committee had originally put forward a warrant article back in 2020, seeking the approval of the town to authorize a committee to undertake a climate action planning process with a goal of net zero carbon emissions. The reason the Energy Action Committee had proposed putting that forward is the Energy Action Committee's mission and purpose through town creation back in 2010 is focused on municipal energy needs. To get to a true carbon neutral position or net zero position, municipal energy use is insufficient. You of course also have to include the businesses and the residences. And so we figured that for something of this magnitude, it needed the full town buy-in and the full town view. We ended up electing to withdraw that article because the feedback we had received at the time from the selectmen and also through advisory committee was that they wanted the next step. Can we get to a budget? Can we see what numbers it would take to do this? And so town administration formed a task force to go ahead and undertake that study. As everyone has been impacted by COVID-19, so is the formation of that committee. So the task force didn't really get underway until the fall, and then it's been a race ever since. But I'm very pleased with what we've been able to accomplish and where we've come out. So the work that we did was first to understand what the appetite in the town was for a net zero plan and goal. So we put forward a public hearing and a presentation back in the October-November timeframe, had very good participation from the town, surveyed those who are participating on preferences, thoughts, and things that they would like to see in a climate action plan and the planning process. Then taking that feedback back, working with Brooks Winter, the MAP consultant, we began to put forward a scope for what a planning process would include, what it would evaluate, and then of course, how much that would cost. The Excel spreadsheet titled Hingham Climate Action Plan Draft Scope of Work is part of the result of those efforts, which breaks down in some detail what the items would be in a climate action planning process and a cost estimate for external help. I would like to note that Mary Savage Dunham of the Planning Board was instrumental in helping us out. We were very sad to see her leave the town, but wish her well in Florida. And her departure actually highlighted a great problem / opportunity for us, and is what again contributed to the delay of the scoping effort, is we realized just to what extent we would need on the ground resources, particularly in the town, to help shepherd this process through. Members of the task force are all volunteers. As advisory committee well knows, there are many volunteers who are helping out, yourselves, of course. And there's a great deal of time commitment, but we're often relegated to the evenings because many of us have day jobs as well. For a successful climate action planning process, we're going to need a great deal of help at all times of day. So we worked additional scoping efforts into the plan to account for greater consultant need to make up for the loss of Mary having leaving and perhaps other strapped town resources. Through the generosity of the Hingham Municipal Light Plant, they've agreed to fund in its entirety that increase. When I say increase, we were originally scoping around 50,000, and we move that number up to 80,000 in light of the additional consulting resources we were expecting. Hingham Municipal Light Plant is funding this effort through a sale earlier this year of their solar renewable energy credits. So the funding will come from that sale, not from any current bills or fees people are paying for their electricity. So this is not any type of expenditure that would at all increase rates that town citizens are paying. Otherwise, the RFP for this process would run through the town, and the Light Board does not need to weigh in on this. So we can have a high degree of confidence in that funding coming from HMLP for this process. Article O, as Brenda had noted, originally had the scoping dollars. Now with HMLP paying that, the other thing that O accomplishes is to set forward the goal of such a plan, or at least to suggest one. And I think that nuance is important. So you may have seen, and Brenda highlights this in her comment, that there is current action at the state level for Massachusetts to attempt to achieve net zero by 2050. Though that legislation has yet been signed by Baker, it is on his desk currently. And there is understanding that even if he does veto it again, that it is highly likely to be overridden and passed into law. So the state looks to be moving towards net zero by 2050. Our plan indicates a goal, or I should say Article O indicates a goal of net zero by 2040 or another date deemed feasible. So why that phrasing? If you look over the past 20 to 30 years, when climate issue and carbon reduction first started really coming into vogue, there have been different plans and goalposts moved. The state of Massachusetts used to have a goal of 80% carbon reduction by 2050 using, I believe, 1990 as the baseline year. They have the current legislation forward because they realize that's not going to do it. The Paris Climate Accords originally were targeting, or I should say it never set an exact goal, but much of the conversation centered on 2050 and an 80% reduction. That goal has moved because we're realizing that the dangers and the carbon emissions are increasing at a rate faster than originally anticipated. On the positive side, technologies have been moving very much in favor for carbon reduction and have been doing so at an exponential rate. And while that's a great fact, it does also make it challenging to put forward such long-standing plans when in a 5 to 10 year span, much of it could be outdated because of the increases of technology. So we set forward the concept of a date of 2040 because we think that that goalpost will likely move again. So we're going to be ahead of it. But we also have, or another date deemed feasible for the climate action planning effort to identify whether that is feasible. And if not, well, then we'll choose another target that is feasible, whether that's 2045 or back to 2050, or if we are so fortunate, perhaps we could even move it up. But we wanted to put that goal in there to be upfront with the citizens of the town as to what we're working towards, but also to get a buy-in on working to achieve that goal if it is indeed deemed feasible. So I'll pause there if there are any reactions either from AdCom or any other members of the task force who might want to weigh in.
Brenda, anything else from you?
No,
I do want to note that Brenda did provide this morning, and it was distributed, the detailed spreadsheet of all of the line items that are contemplated by this study. And it's an impressive piece of work. Thank you.
The only thing I would add, Bob, is to highlight that the process as proposed will involve a large number of public workshops seeking public input in terms of surveys. So there will be many points along the way where residents of the town, businesses in town can contribute to the process.
Thank you. And any members of the advisory committee that have questions or comments?
Bob, yeah, I just want to thank Brenda for her kind of tackling this one. She dove into it head first, and there was a lot of stuff going on around this article. So, you know, first year on AdCom, it's a weighty article, and I appreciate her leadership on it.
Well said. And Andy?
Do you want comments now on the language of the article of the recommended motion?
Well, if they raise a substantive point, yes. If it's really just something for the editors, I think that can be done later.
Okay, I'll hold my question.
Okay, Victor?
Bob, just to be clear, which I think it probably is. So Brenda, this is a task force that will make a variety of recommendations, some of which conceivably could be bylaw related, which would need to come back to town meeting. Others could be operational for town administration, which it could then decide. What is being envisioned in terms of requirements or recommendations for the general public, or is that sort of all premature and that's sort of one of the purposes of the task force?
The purpose of the Climate Action Planning Committee, which is actually Article P, is to develop that plan, and it would, given, as Brad said, that the evolving nature of both carbon emissions problems in our world, but also the technologies that are developing, there's no way, I think, to scope out exactly what changes everyone would need to make now. But we know what the first ones are, which is electrifying more things. At least that seems to be the consensus from all the climate action plans in our surrounding towns. So yes, I think there would be a series of different things that would be, I think, as I wrote up in the comment, the idea of the Climate Action Committee would be providing information to people about what's available to support them in making some of these changes, and also what the goals are.
Okay, thank you.
Any other members of the AdCom? Andy, I see you still have your hand up.
That's a mistake.
Okay. Not seeing any other members of the AdCom. Are there any members of other town boards or committees that would like to comment on or ask questions about this article? If so, please use the raise hand function and identify yourself by name and address your questions to the chair. I don't see any hands. So we'd open up the questions to members of the general public. Are there any members of the general public that would like to make a comment or ask a question? If so, please identify yourself by name and address your questions or comments to the chair. And I see that Laura Burns has her hand up. And Laura, this is like guest celebrity night for former AdCom chairs. So we gave Donna Smallwood a great welcome on the last article. We'd like to extend a great welcome to you on this one.
Thank you, Bob. Laura Burns, 479 Main Street. I thought everybody forgot it. I was ever on the advisory committee. It was so long ago. But I'm here tonight representing Hingham Net Zero, which is a community organization that is working on helping our community and our neighbors figure out how to reduce carbon emissions in town. And we've been working for the last year and a half on the project that is before you, the idea that the town should have a climate action plan. And I don't think we need to rehearse why we're doing this. I think everybody's pretty up to speed on that. So what I would just like to do, if it's all right with you, Mr. Chair, is to ask those, we have a number of people here tonight in support of the article, if they could just raise their hands in real life or digitally, just to say, I'm here to support this article, then to give a feeling of who's here to do that. And I'd like to thank you very much for your careful attention to this matter.
So now I have all kinds of hands raised. Thank you very much. And
Thank you. I think you can put them down now.
people who are not interested in making a further comment or question, if you could take your hand down, that would be most appreciated. right, and I'm not seeing any other hands raised digitally or people waving frantically on the screen. So are members of the advisory committee? Oh, wait a minute, Brooks Winter.
Hi, everybody. I'm the MAPC consultant that worked with the team. I just want to thank Brad and Maria and Kathy and Mary and all the folks at HMLP who have worked on this project. I think it's a really exciting scope that y'all have put together with our help, and it's really nice to see all the faces here in support. And yeah, I think the project was also laid a good foundation for a really successful process going forward. We had a great public input session in the fall that was really well attended, and I think a good starting place for a good continued conversation. And in terms of that socialization and preparing the community to dive into this process that Brad mentioned earlier, I think we really accomplished that. So it's been a pleasure to work with the town. And I think we're excited where we ended up with you all. So thanks for the opportunity to work with you all on this, and good luck with the town meeting and the rest of the process.
Thanks for your comments. I'm sure they're shared by everyone. And thanks for the involvement of the MAPC in the process. I don't see any other hands from members of the public. Are members of the advisory committee prepared to vote on this at this point?
We are.
Bob,
Yes, Andy.
the recommended motion in O says the town vote to use the 80,000 provided by the Hingham Municipal Light Plant. And the article, of course, says, will the town vote to raise and appropriate, borrow, or transfer? And I don't know if those are magic words such that this should say, vote to appropriate and transfer to the Climate Action Planning Committee $80,000 from available funds donated to the town by HMLP.
It seems to me it's a direct grant by HMLP to the Climate Action Planning Study. I mean, we could consult town council on this, but I wonder if the funds would flow into available funds. We're not appropriating anything.
Bob, this is Tom. If you'd like, one of the benefits of Zoom World is that we have moments like this that I could actually go off camera for 5 minutes and come back with an answer after calling John Coughlin, if you'd like, while you guys debate Article N. Is that something you want to do or no?
Or Article P.
Article P.
That makes complete sense. And I think we can then do Article P. And when we see you back, we'll hopefully have our answer. So is this a team presentation by Brenda and Alan?
Alan, why don't you?
I think I'll just jump in. Article P obviously follows right from O. They're directly coordinated. I mean, if O was, as we were just sort of talking about, is the should the town undertake the effort to create a climate action plan and utilize resources to do so. Article P is essentially the vehicle or the forum through which that work actually gets done. It actually creates, sort of like you would create a building committee to once you agree to build the building, you got to have a group of people who lead the work and actually do it. And so that's what Article P does, is establish a climate action planning committee and creates a structure for it, basically naming a representative from several relevant boards and committees of the town, where each of those committees can designate the member they choose to serve on the Climate Action Planning Committee, and then also 4 general residents get named by the board and the moderator to create the structure of the committee. The original recommendation was to have the committee be formed by 12 members, represented by I can read them if you like, but their name there. During the process, and Brad could probably jump in to this, it was discussed that maybe 12 was a little bit large in terms of and slightly unwieldy. Many, most committees for voting purposes have an odd number. And just it was thought that maybe 12 was a little much. And so the recommendation is to reduce the committee down to 11 members by taking out the originally designated representative from the Ware River Estuary Committee. The feeling being that, again, with the 7 relevant boards and committees, there still was a representative group reflecting different perspectives, both from sort of the climate, environmental community, as well as other major or significantly impact aspects of the community, such as the school committee and the Development Industrial Commission to represent the business side of the issue. And then along with 4 individual representatives or residents. So that's, again, the general introduction is in O, the town decides, let's do this. Article P is here's how we actually do it, and designate the people who will lead the work and actually get it done and make the recommendations that would on the actual action items that the town would subsequently implement. Probably Brenda, as Evan pointed out, Brenda is definitely the captain of the AdCom team here. You're certainly welcome to add anything to that, or maybe ask Brad to comment.
Well, I'll just make a quick observation that either the selectman or the moderator could actually appoint someone from the Ware River Estuary group, so that, and I would think there'd be a natural candidate. Brad, did you want to add anything?
Sure, I'm happy to jump in briefly. Thank you, Alan. As Alan represented it, it was precisely the thinking in this. While the concern is 12 large, we purposefully made a broad effort because, as noted in our earlier discussion, that to come up with a plan that impacts the entirety of the town, the government, the municipality, the residents and the businesses, we wanted to ensure that we had representation across all facets of that, and to bring in on the municipal side any bodies that would be directly affected by the work of the committee. So balancing that desire with speed and efficiency, we thought, okay, we could afford to reduce by 1. The thinking with the Ware River Estuary Committee was, while we have 1 Hingham represented on that is really a tri-town group. And so we felt that by pulling in that committee particularly, we would be bringing in other towns, and also to their remit, perhaps with more park focused, wasn't quite fully aligned with the climate action planning process. Not that they couldn't have valuable input, but when we were looking to where can we tighten this up, that seemed to be the most natural spot. And so that's why we thought, okay, if we were to leave 1 off, that would be it. And as the chair noted, of course, the moderator of the selectmen can bring that group back in if they so desire. So there is some flexibility there by design.
Members of the advisory committee with questions or comments? Andy?
Do you intend that the member of the Hingham Municipal Light Plant be appointed by the plant manager, Paul Hingham, or by the light board?
I looked at that this afternoon when I was reading through this. First of all, I think the formal name of the HMLP is the Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant. That's how it appears on their website in any event. And the lighting plant would be a distinct entity, I think, from the light board. So I think the article as written would seem to contemplate that it is going to be somebody who is an employee of the Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant.
Can we make that clearer, Bob? Just because of the phrase below that says each of the above to be selected by their respective committee.
So what would you say? I mean, it does say Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant. Would you change committee or?
Now, I would say an employee of the Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant as designated by the plant manager. If that's what the intention is.
I would have no problem with that, or just with using the same language used for the other groups, or its designee. Victor, do you have a view on
Well,
this?
I guess I was going to ask why is the focus on the plant choosing someone as opposed to the board choosing its designee, a member or its designee? What is the thinking there?
I suppose there's more expertise in the plant itself than on a volunteer advisory board.
But the board could designate
Light
someone.
board. It's true.
Kathy Reardon has her hand up.
Hi, my impression of this discussion is that in fact, we really didn't contemplate this distinction. Brad, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but and so I don't know whether we want to nail it down so tight. Could it be either a member of the board of the light plant, or could it be a member of an employee? Seems to me that that's really more a decision that they should make than we should make for them in advance. And we just never discussed it.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I could jump in there and address that. Oh, I'm sorry.
I think if we just used or its designee, it leaves it up to the lighting plant to decide. I mean, they could appoint one of its own, they could appoint somebody from the board. I suppose they could appoint somebody who they thought was going to best contribute from the viewpoint of an electrical municipal utility.
And that is the thought process. And just as an example, the light plant sits on the Energy Action Committee. And Paul Haino is its designee currently and has been for 10 years. So there is precedence for how this is handled within the town.
So if we simply added the words or its designee, does that keep everybody happy?
Is it clear as to who is the appointing authority? That's really my main point.
Well, I think
Is
it's
it-
the lighting plant.
As
Rather-
distinguished from the board, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, so who acts for the plant? I mean, thinking about it, doesn't the board act for the Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant? The board appointed appoints the general manager, but the board actually probably is the decision maker of the for the lighting plant. So maybe this is all sort of irrelevant, other than your or designee point, which I think is a good one.
Is Paul Haino is not on the call yet? I mean, Paul is going to be here later tonight, I believe. We could defer a vote on this until after his arrival. Or we could,
Excuse me, Bob, I don't think Paul is going to be here this evening because we deferred his discussion.
oh, all right. Okay.
One member of Hingham HMLP as designated by the light board.
So now you're saying that the light board makes the designations, the board.
I
makes
thought
the
that's what you were saying.
My way of thinking, that makes more sense to me, that the board should decide who is going to represent them. in this process, whether it's one of them or whether it's an employee or whatever. I think otherwise it's kind of topsy-turvy. I don't think you're going to ask your employee to appoint a board member to something. It doesn't, I don't know, it doesn't seem like the way government normally works.
So just as designated by the board.
Sounds like it.
We're adding an entity that wasn't in the original article. I mean, is there an issue about that?
Bob, I suggest that the Hingham Municipal Lighting Board is the decision-making body of the Hingham Light Plan. So when you say, who is the voting authority of the Hingham Municipal Light Plan? It doesn't have stockholders, right?
I didn't sit through all of these. No, it doesn't. I didn't sit through all the meetings. I'm only like reading the language that came to us. Should we defer the vote on this till Tuesday and get in touch with Paul Hino and or the chair of the light board?
We'll be deferring till June at this point.
Yeah, it seems like this is why it can't be 12. See what it's like to try and get 15.
This is like master planning committee we do. Thanks, Dave.
Well, Bob, Tom Mayo's back, so maybe we can get the answer to O, and then maybe he can try to find out about P.
Great observation.
While we move on.
Thank
Is
you.
anyone from the HMLP board on the call?
I don't see any hands raised. Tom, do you have an answer for us on O?
I do. So I spoke with Town Council John Coughlin, and what he said is the town should appropriate through the article and the recommended motion, through the recommended motion, the amount it wants to appropriate for support of the project. If the HMLP is going to contribute an amount of money for the project, then they should do so as an outside agreement, either with us, like through a gift account or something. But frankly, the cleanest way for that to happen would be for them to contract directly with the chosen consultant that's going to be doing the climate action planning effort for the portion of it that they will be paying for. So in other words, the recommended motion, it sounds like, should include only the $50,000 for appropriation.
$80,000? At the time,
$80,000.
to appropriate $80,000?
Okay, yeah, whatever it is that everybody wants from the town. Yep.
And then when the light plant gives the money for to fund the $80,000, does the committee end up with $160,000?
So that was my question. My understanding was the town would be paying $50,000 and HMLP was donating 80. If that's not the case, that's what I understand.
HMLP is donating all 80.
HMLP is the sole funding source for the entirety of the project?
Yes.
Right. And it's important.
Okay. I'm not sure you need an article for that. But I agree with Bob. At this point, I would postpone this conversation and talk to the HMLP board.
Okay. Then we have a question for you on Article P, which is the Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant is one of the organizations included, and the question arose, who designates its representative, the lighting plant itself or the light board?
I would say whoever we designate to designate it. So if the article, town meeting, decides they want the program manager to do it, maybe that's what's contemplated by town meeting and is allowed to do. That's possible. You could also ask and probably more traditional would be to ask the board to set a designee, ask the light plant board to pick a designee.
I see Roger Freeman has joined us.
How about, because I think what we want to do is reflect or acknowledge that HMLP is paying for this. So you'd say one member representing the Hingham Municipal Lighting Plan as designated by the Light Board.
That would feel respectful.
Roger,
That would work for me.
Roger, do you have a view?
Well, I'm just joining into the call. My wife had been watching, and so I just stepped in. I was under the impression that Paul was going to be on the call here. And so I'm happy to answer any questions or provide any feedback that I can, and I'm happy to take any messages back to the board for consideration of these issues. So I'm surprised that we don't have someone here at the meeting, but like I said, I've stepped in and I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone might have to the extent I can answer them or address any concerns.
I think first you probably need to identify yourself by name and street address.
Oh, I'm
Just for
sorry. I'm Roger Freeman, 269 High Street, and I'm on the light board.
Okay. And the first question that arose, Roger, was whether the town needed to appropriate the $80,000 and then have the light board, the light plant, contribute the $80,000 to the town and have the town use that contribution to fund the $80,000, or whether we need appropriation language or not. And we've had a quick consultation with town council, who seems to think that we need appropriation language.
We need appropriation language if it's coming from the town. If it's coming from the HMLPs, somehow a grant program or something from HMLP to the town, then we do not. But if it needs to be appropriated as new money, then it should have an appropriation, and it would come.
So we can vote on O as it's presently drafted to use the $80,000 from HMLP. Because the town's not appropriating anything.
Yeah, so Bob is if the town isn't appropriating anything and it's coming from the HMLP, I don't know that you need an article. That's my point. That's new to me, and I don't know that you need an article. But John just told me that if this is money coming from HMLP for this project of money that HMLP already has as like a gift or a program funding, then it does not need another appropriation. There's no reason to raise that money. It's already been raised.
Well, I think the article goes beyond just the money.
Correct.
Because it talks about, at least in a general way, what the climate action plan is going to do.
And can I just ask a question? With who would own the work product if HMLP contracted directly with whomever we hire to do this? So it does make sense that if we're going to pay for something, it should come from the town, regardless of how it's funded, even if it's granted back to us or something. I mean, we wouldn't want the HMLP to own the output of a climate study. It really is the ownership of the town through the Climate Action Committee, is it not?
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you're saying an article is needed that sort of identifies that the climate action plan will be made by the town for the town using the funds from HMLP.
Correct.
Yeah, I think maybe if the recommendation read that the town vote to accept and use $80,000 provided by the Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant for the purposes of creating a climate action plan, which will evaluate, et cetera, et cetera. Does that work for everyone?
Bob, I think town council's point is if the lighting plan simply makes a donation to the town of $80,000, then that goes into general funds, then the town meeting has to appropriate that $80,000 out.
That's not what I heard. I think John.
That's not what Tom said.
Yeah, that's not what I talked with John about, but This is a new twist, and I've not had a chance to talk to John about it, Bob. I'm not sure what the appropriate thing to do here is, frankly.
Okay, and the second question is really whether it should be the lighting plant or the light board that designates the member.
My suggestion on the table was that wording of the one member representing the Hingham Municipal Lighting Plant as designated by the light board.
I think we should just defer our votes on this until next Tuesday so that we have reasonable certainty about exactly what it is we're voting and that we have it right.
Bob,
Yes, Libby.
oh,
Well,
I'm just gonna lower
Yeah.
my hand so I don't forget then later. I would also offer, whether it's something that we consider at this meeting or it's something that's considered after the fact, and then I think Ben makes the point that we want the deliverable of this scope and work to be owned by the town. So even if the article said that the town vote to appropriate $80,000 and then such sum to be provided to the town from the Hingham Municipal Light Plant or something like that. So that legally, I think the appropriation therefore allows us to, in a sense, the town write the check and own the deliverable, but that sum is to be provided to the town or reimbursed to the town from the Hingham Municipal Light Plant. So I would just make a recommendation such as that.
I don't think we're going to resolve this question tonight, so I think we should defer it until Tuesday and get it right. So I think we should.
Tom has his hand up.
I don't see any hands raised.
Well, he didn't use the hand function. He's just raising his hand.
Oh, Tom Patch.
Yes.
Mr. Patch, please
Hi.
identify.
Yeah,
Please
Tom,
identify yourself.
yep, Tom Patch, Ship Street. I'm here on something else, but I just took the time to look up the general laws. 164, general laws chapter 164, section 55 talks about municipal lighting plants. And the last sentence of that just says that a municipal light board, shall have the authority to construct, purchase, or lease a gas or electric plant in accordance with the vote of the town and to maintain and operate the same. So I just offer that may or may not be helpful in answering your question as to where the authority lies.
Thanks for the legal research. I think we should get back to town council and revisit this on Tuesday night. So I think we should, I thank everybody for being here. I thank Brenda and Brad and Alan and all of the concerned citizens that have showed up. But I think it's more important that we get this right than that we just vote tonight. So we can go on to Article U, the Plymouth River School authorization to borrow. Dave, you want to
Yeah.
present that?
Sure, happy to. So John Ferris is joining us as well. Thank you, John, for spending another night of your week on Zoom with us. I won't go into a lot of detail on this. We heard John's presentation before the selectmen, what seems like a year and a half ago. And where we stand is basically unchanged. So just to summarize, the town has been accepted into the accelerated repair program for the MSBA as it relates to the Plymouth River school windows. There is $1 million in the bank from the Broadstone, have I got that right? Broadstone Bear Cove Alliance from a mitigation payment, which is going to be directed to this project. But under the MSBA regs, the town has to authorize the full cost of the project. And then the town, we're not quite yet there, but we are working our way towards the process of then applying to the MSBA to be permitted to be reimbursed for somewhere starting at about 31.5% and potentially a couple points more of MSBA eligible expenses to be reimbursed to the town on a pay-as-you-go basis. So
net, when this is all said and done, if we are successful with the MSA program, counting the $1 million also from the Broadstone payment, the town's exposure obviously would be reduced by both, ultimate exposure would be reduced by the $1 million and then the MSBA match. The missing piece of the puzzle, as you'll recall from the selectmen's meeting, is a comfortable estimate of the cost of this project. And there is diligent work underway as we speak to ascertain a good number for that. But in talking with John today, and John can certainly add any thoughts he's had between the time he and I spoke and tonight if there are new developments. But I think it raises a question that I would have for the group, which is, you'll recall Mary Power, at least as a select person, suggested that she did not want to vote yet absent a number. And so the BOS deferred its formal vote on this article. We find ourselves in somewhat a similar position, which leaves me with a question as to the recommended motion, given that the actual dollar amount is absent. I guess the one other thing I'd point out, at least as it relates to this article, which I think is important, and we can circle back to the question about the dollar amount, is that as I understand it, this article would authorize this project to take place with or without the MSBA reimbursement. So I just wanted to point that out for folks. The MSBA reimbursement is certainly expected. I don't think anyone has a reason to believe that it's not going to be forthcoming absent something extraordinary. But nevertheless, this vote is one in which, unlike those who think back a year or two to the school building committee establishment when we hadn't yet been accepted into the foster program, and that was, as I recall it, there were certain contingencies related to MSBA approval. This article, at least as drafted, and I don't think it would be permitted, doesn't have a contingency. So this would be an authorization and then a continued effort, diligent effort to get the MSBA funding on the back end. So that's the general summary. But Bob, maybe you have a better sense for me about a recommended motion in the context of a dollar amount that's not yet solid.
Could I just add one?
I thought I saw a $4.1 million amount the other day. Is that? Go ahead, John.
Yeah, if I could just add, so that on the article, I did submit some amount, Bob. It was about 4.2 million when I put it in, but that was based just on my estimate. So and then basically when I went to an MSBA board meeting when they actually approved this project. So there's one thing. So we are approved for the project and we will get reimbursement. But if you read this article, it says the MSBA may reimburse. That's standard MSBA language. Right. We are in the accelerated repair program. This project has been approved by the MSBA. The MSBA has actually assigned to us the OPM and the designer to do this work. The initial part of the work of the construction design documents as well as the OPM is being funded by the mitigation account. We've signed a letter of ICC compliance. So what Dave and I had a conversation this afternoon. The thing is, just be interested in, that's interesting is the MSBA always says may, be eligible for funding. The reality is, so the timeline for this project is really that we will get the OPM. We have to have them contracted by March 22nd. Yesterday, they did a tour of the building, the OPM and the designer, and they know that we're looking for some type of price. I think that, this price isn't, I don't believe we're going to get a price by the end of the month where the warrant may go to print. So we may in fact need a supplemental. They'll continue doing the work because we have that funding from the mitigation account to provide for the OPM and the construction and the design type documents to get a package ready to submit to the MSBA in July of 2021. That package will be submitted to the MSBA and the MSBA will vote this project in August of 21. And, so basically they're going to look, they're going to see that all the processes were followed correctly. And they've already, since they've accepted us into the accelerated repair project,
At that point, they'll say, yes, we're authorizing them to move forward to bidding and to get their project done. And I think, it could be even before then, they'll give us a document for a construction document before July that says, here's what your reimbursement's gonna be. Just not sure. This is an accelerated peer, so I think they want first, here's your OPM contract, and then I think they're gonna follow up with another contract with us. They have a regular regimented schedule for doing this. Similar to what we did with the Foster School, we have a feasibility study agreement with them that says they'll basically fund 33.75% of that. So I think the long and short is we're not gonna have a number by the end of March, but we hope that we'll have some number for a supplemental prior to town meeting.
Bob, does that mean another morning vote on the day of town meeting like we sometimes had to do in the past?
Well, it sounds like this is going to be one of those, the advisory committee will make its recommendation at the town meeting.
It may be earlier, Bob. I don't know, once you finish your votes, I'm not sure what, if you have a meeting before then. All I'm saying is that it's very unlikely that by the end of March and when the warrant goes to print, that they're gonna give us an up to figure, that I'm gonna have any good figure to really.
Oh, good Lord.
My sentiment exactly.
I feel the same way, Joe Kelly. Just hit that mute button.
So sorry. Sorry.
By the way, Bob's going to have us doing 4 meetings a week in June. So, because we're going to defer so many of these things.
It's only because they like seeing you so much, Evan.
I know.
That's because we don't want to take a town. I mean, the other alternative is once we get this project approved by the MSBA, and in words, in conversations I've had with the MSBA, they have articulated the schedule to me. And they said, okay, we're going to approve this project in August of 21 in words, not necessarily in writing. And then after that, you have 60 days to get the money. So, for the size of the project, we didn't want to, have to have some fall town meeting for this project. So that's why we're trying to get an up to number for the April meeting so we can have the funding ready. It'll go out to bid and these windows will be installed in summer of 22.
So the Tom Mayo, the Board of Selectmen aren't going to vote this without a number.
They did vote it.
When?
Oh, they voted it without a number, yes.
The selectmen voted it last night without a number.
Oh, they did?
Yo, I can't wait.
They left it in your hands.
A little crazy. It's Thursday.
Well,
Of course, they don't have to write the recommended motion. I mean,
right.
Well, I'm sorry, folks, but it looks like we should defer this until we have a number. Thanks for being here, John.
Bob, can I just ask one quick question on the comment while John's here too? I mean, for anyone who's read the comment, I took a different approach than saying that it's been approved because there's still a vote to take place from the MSBA to approve it. So if people, I think I'm looking at just mostly the lawyers or people who are looking at word by word, I don't want to understate the situation, but on the other hand, given the fact that there's still a vote to take, I also didn't want to say that it was 100% certain. It strikes me there's a greater than 0% chance that something goes wrong. It may be infinitesimal, but I mean, if maybe in the time between now and we get a number, people can reflect on that and just think if the comment speaks to that. Because when John tells me that we still need another vote from the MSBA, that makes me feel like we may be accepted, but we're not approved with a capital A.
Yeah, Dave, you're absolutely right. Okay, I mean, don't minimize what David just said. He is right, because what we don't know is, what level are they going to approve, and would there be add-alts that we have proposed as well, when we go through this whole project, because it's just going to be windows, and then, the windows could lead into some other repairs that they have to do. So David's absolutely right. We don't know what they're going to approve. So that's true.
Okay. Well, I think we have other business tonight that we
We
probably
do,
should.
But before we move on, Bob, I just want to thank John because I credit him for moving. He's proving me wrong. We can actually walk and chew gum at the same time. So we can do two things at once from a building standpoint in the schools. And John, your field trip to Foster a couple of years back, I think prompted this. So well done. And thank you for pushing it forward.
It was the trip to Plymouth River, but that's okay.
Oh, whatever. One of them. One of our
We
decaying
we did them
schools.
both. We did them both. So.
The trip to Plymouth River made it absolutely necessary that we do this. So
Yes.
No doubt.
Yeah.
so
Thanks, John.
All right,
I
thank
think
you.
it's a
folks.
sense of this committee that we all support it. We just need the number.
I understand, and I'm trying.
He does too.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave. And the Rockwood Road transfer is going to be deferred. The selectmen took a no action vote on that the other night. There are title issues. As I understand it, the Affordable Housing Trust is going to take a vote on Monday to potentially withdraw the article. And so it may be that we will never have to hear that. But for tonight, I feel like I'm the draft board. There's another deferment. Kristen, did you want to add anything to that?
No, just that I think that the issues with the easements have been cleared, but now that they want them to do a site investigation to see if the land is buildable, that's why they think there's just more work to be done before it can be voted. And selectmen asked them to bring it back next year. So they're going to vote on that on Monday.
Okay. And that brings us to the, well, I see people here that are on the Hingham Municipal Light Plant transmission article, and we decided to defer that because the selectmen have not voted. Where's Erin?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear what you were saying.
I see that there are folks here waiting, I think, to participate in the Hingham Municipal Light Plant article, and you thought we should defer this one as well.
So we had deferred this one because they were putting together, Paul is putting together a summary of all of the meetings that have occurred to then present to the Board of Selectmen next week. And we felt it was better to have him present that and then hear this and then hear that versus starting in the beginning of what the Board of Selectmen have
Okay.
already
And
heard.
Paul's supposed to get a report to the selectmen tomorrow, and then they're going to address it next week. So I just didn't want people to sit here that for an article that is not going to be heard probably till next Thursday.
Yep.
And so let's go to Article BB, which is a citizens petition to amend general bylaws, Articles 2 and 3. The proponent is Tom Patch. Tom and I had a lengthy discussion about this afternoon. I thank you, Tom, for being here. Why don't you go ahead and explain the article as you see it and identify yourself by name and street address.
Yep, it's Tom Patch, Ship Street, and I thank the advisory committee for the opportunity to speak this evening to try to give them some understanding of where I'm coming from. It's nice to know that I'm not a 4F, so we're going forward with this and not being deferred. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to take what I see as a nice tradition and trying to improve on it. And Bob is correct. We did have a lengthy discussion. Bob was good enough to provide to me some essentially bullet points of issues that he was concerned about. And, I tried to touch base with him about that this afternoon and provide him some information. So currently what happens is at town meeting, we have a situation where there's been a tradition developed and pretty much from the early 70s, and I had done a little research and the town clerk had done a little research on this, where basically it's gotten to a point where certain employees who have passed away since the last town meeting would be recognized at essentially at the inception of town meeting. And that group of employees turn out to be essentially all town employees other than school department employees. And I guess there's some issue about essentially getting the names from the school department, and that's the reason why the school department employee names are not included. So I looked at this and trying to improve on it and make it more concrete and embedded in the town meeting process rather than essentially being discretionary. Came up with this warrant article whereby there would be a standing resolution to recognize the passing of not just town employees, but appointed volunteers and elected officials. And my goal here was essentially to have one branch of town government represented by town meeting, the legislative branch, provide an expression of gratitude for the effort of essentially what could be described as the worker bees in the executive side of things at town meeting in the year after they've passed. And as I pointed out to Bob, you hate to use the analogy of a wake, but wakes are not for the deceased, they're for the living. And the mention of this is really a sign of respect by town meeting to the families, loved ones, and friends to recognize the fact that there's this group of people here who make this town happen, and they've forged the town into the place where everybody wants to come and possibly raise a family, and to essentially recognize them on an even, non-judgmental, more inclusive, takes a village type of viewpoint, where you're just acknowledging that these people contributed to the good of the town without getting into particulars or whatever. And so I also see some other possible value, added values here of demonstrating good citizenship, encouraging civic engagement and responsibility through participation in either elected office as an appointed volunteer, or even working for the town as an employee. And so that's sort of where that's my objective here. And Bob had asked me more or less what our peer communities do. And so what I did was I took essentially the towns that this committee uses as their benchmark communities for financial matters. And I went through and I looked to see whether or not there was anything specific that in this regard with another community, one of those communities have. And I couldn't find anything. It's specific such as this. There's no question that resolutions are, and resolutions such as this are totally within the subject matter of town meeting. That's not the question. It's how you basically handle them. And what I'm trying to do in this situation is try to give some permanency, some structure to this, so that you don't have scenarios where someone ad hoc gets up at town meeting and requests that town meeting recognize a particular individual who's passed, not because the person shouldn't be recognized, but again, sort of to make town, to address this issue, create a mechanism by which this is done. And I had gone back and done some research back into the 30s, 40s, and 50s, and it was, it didn't happen a lot, but it did happen. You could see it through the town transcripts where this essentially would happen. So that's sort of what my thought process behind this. I did find, interestingly, that for example, Marblehead requires, they actually put in their bylaws, town meeting bylaw, that they do the Pledge of Allegiance prior to every session of town meeting. And although Brookline is not one of the benchmark communities, they actually have in their town meeting bylaw, not just the Pledge of Allegiance, but also the singing of the national anthem. And I understand those are not resolutions, but it's the idea of, and I think the concern I was hearing is, does this really belong in town meeting? And, my answer is, well, obviously, the town has already made that decision by its current practice. And so the question is, making it more inclusive, making it, giving it some permanency, and trying to create a process by which, people can be recognized. And I was very careful about trying not to put any kind of, or trying to put a minimum administrative burden on the town itself by using the language known or made known to the town clerk. And in front of the Board of Selectmen, Mary Parr, made a point which actually I thought went to my underlying point, where she had alluded to a situation where when she was on the Bear Cove Park Committee, there was a longtime member apparently had passed away, and town meeting came along, and certain names of certain people were mentioned as having passed since the last town meeting, and this person wasn't mentioned, and she felt very upset that didn't occur, and she ultimately consulted with former town administrator Charlie Costello about it. But the point about this is, the way I fashioned this is, it gives people such as Mary Parr in that situation the ability to ensure that that person would be recognized, and that she and others like her wouldn't have that feeling that this person was left out. And that's where the language made known to the town clerk. And so it puts the onus on that person to make the information known to the town clerk. And in speaking to Eileen McCracken, she's, my take on it was she seemed to concur with that, as with any new law or bylaw or whatever, the first year of implementation is always going to be typically the year where there's going to be the greatest administrative obligation or undertaking. And after that, in this particular situation, it seems to be pretty much cruise control, because you're essentially creating a database and checking things against the database. So as I said to Bob, there's no agenda here. It's just, in the past probably 10 years, I've had there's been incidences after town meeting and just talking in general people about town meeting. Sometimes these comments come up that it's unfortunate that people who are long-term volunteers, appointed volunteers, and so I'm talking about people who are actually formally part of town government, who had put years and years and years in, weren't referenced. And there's that's essentially what I'm trying to get to. Now, I understand that there is a concern about time, because this seemed to be the big issue in front of the Board of Selectmen. They all seem to agree that it's a nice thing to do, et cetera, and they all seem to believe that the school department employees certainly need to be brought into the current practice, but they had an issue with volunteers, the appointed volunteers, because, and the point was, we have all these people who are not appointed volunteers who do things, but for example, the senior center and so forth. But again, I'm limiting this to essentially one branch of town government acknowledging the efforts of another branch of town government. And so that would exclude, and no disrespect to the efforts by those people who, for example, volunteer at the senior center in a non-appointed way, but no disrespect to them. But again, I'm trying to fashion this and have some sort of limitation on this is to one branch of government showing a sign of respect for the efforts of the people in the other side of branch of town government. And the other issue seemed to be was, well, what if we leave somebody out? Well, my conversations with town clerk Eileen McCracken, she says, well, there actually have been people left out under their current practice. You know, and the reality is, I don't, with all due respect, I don't think anybody, the fact that there's a possibility that you're not going to bat 1,000 is a reason not to do this. I mean, it's easy enough handled where at the end of the reading of the list, you know, whether it's the town clerk, the chair of the board of select people, or the moderator, just simply say that, you know, this was a list of information known or made known to the town clerk, and if someone was omitted, it was not intentional. So I think that's easily resolvable. I think Bob Curley brought up the idea that, well, what if someone gets up and objects to a particular person's name being named? And again, on the continuum of possibilities, everything is possible. I think, you know, and Bob and I disagree respectfully. I just think, in all candor, that's it's a possibility, but I think in that context, it's going to be if it happens, it's going to be a very bizarre likelihood that happens. I just can't realistically see that actually happens in that particular setting. You know, and then Joe Fisher had mentioned towards the end of when we were vetting this in front of the selectmen, he had mentioned, well, you know, he had looked at, there's a book that's put out by the Moderators Association. It's called Town Meeting Time. And I'm very familiar with it. I used to do town council stuff, not for Hingham, but for a different town. And I'm very familiar with it. I'm very familiar with the resolutions, and resolutions are clearly part of the town meeting process. And in fact, Town Meeting Time recognizes that. And to the point where it's noted that it's such a common integral part of town meeting that you don't even need a warrant article to make a motion for a resolution. Joe Fisher seemed to, his reading of Town Meeting Time was that things like this have no place in town meeting. And as I said to Bob, I was very taken aback when he had said that, because, you know, I know Town Meeting Time pretty well. I've had, you know, multiple occasions to reference it over the years. And I was kind of taken aback because I said, I don't see anywhere where Town Meeting says that. So I went and, of course, after that meeting, I went and pulled my copy of Town Meeting Time and I looked at it, and it says quite the opposite. A very short 1-paragraph section where it simply recognizes that resolutions, you know, done through motion, and to the point where there's not even a need to have a warrant article, in order to proceed on one. So, I haven't spoken with Joe Fisher afterwards, so I don't know if this was a case where someone provided him with their take on what Town Meeting Time says, or he read it and you know, his reading of it was not accurate. I don't know, but I'm just trying to alert you to what the concerns seem to be with from the Board of Selectmen. So that's what I'm coming from. I'm hopeful that the advisory committee would recommend favorable action on this. I understand it's a time issue. I get it. I estimate that it would take about 5 seconds to name each individual in the last position that they held. And when I mean last position, I'm not talking about, you know, getting down to the nitty gritty. You know, they were school department employee, you know, DPW employee, something like this. And I purposely crafted this bylaw language to leave a lot of wiggle room on how it could be actually implemented. And so I guess, you know, my thinking is, you know, we can't, you know, for example, you guys are a classic example. You put in a ton of hours, and your family, you're sacrificing hours, time that you could be spending with your family, friends, et cetera, et cetera. And I just think that giving 5 seconds recognition to each of you in the year in which you passed, because we're all headed that way, is not asking too much of town meeting. And Bob had indicated, well, what happens if people move away and we lose track of them? But again, there's no affirmative obligation to track people. It's known or made known to the town clerk. And if anything, it puts the onus on the persons who want to make, who's the, the particular person is maybe moved to California, Florida, so forth, and has passed away. It puts the onus on others to notify the town clerk. And if it's significant enough to them that the town clerk would, that their name be mentioned in this roll call, then it gives them that mechanism to make it happen. So that's pretty much my pitch. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for the time you spent on this. Let me offer my comments as the liaison. First of all, I don't think anybody disagrees with the idea of thanking volunteers. As a matter of fact, I think it's been all of our experience that thank yous are said very frequently at almost every single town meeting. The thank yous have been said throughout the course of this meeting tonight. Thank yous are said constantly at the Board of Selectmen, and thank yous appear in the warrant and in the town report. I don't think there's any real dearth of thank yous offered to our town volunteers. I tried to understand what the genesis of this article was, and as Tom indicated, it's kind of anecdotal evidence of relatives of former employees of volunteers that have made expressions of it would be nice to do this. Kind of corollary of my initial remarks, I'm not sure that there's a need to do this. I asked Tom about our benchmark communities. There is no bylaw in a benchmark community that requires this kind of procedure at a town meeting. We have a lot of customs, traditions, and ceremonial acts that are embodied in our public life. And I question whether it really is the role of bylaws to mandate things like invocations by the clergy, or the Pledge of Allegiance, or who presents the colors, or that sort of thing. I think the purpose of a bylaw is to serve more effectively having a government function within the town than to address these ceremonial functions. This proposed bylaw was run by the Attorney General. The Attorney General really didn't weigh in on it, but raised questions of how privacy rights would be handled. So the names of deceased members of many families would be read publicly, and did they have a right to notice, and do they have a right to say don't do it, or I don't want to have my spouse's death mentioned in public. I don't think that is highly likely, but there's a lot of attention that's being paid to privacy rights. The proposal does add tasks to already busy town employees, and first and foremost to our clerk, who is going to be a new clerk. At the present time, deceased municipal employees' names are read because they can be identified from the town's retirement system. access to the school retirement system is not something that the town has, and again raises questions. The big shift that this proposed bylaw addresses is to add appointed volunteers, although right now it doesn't use those words, but Tom says that's his intention. I think Tom Mayo counted up something a little better than 400 appointed volunteers and elected officials that are acting in the town every year. Inevitably, people are going to be left out. And I personally would think it makes more sense to just offer a generalized statement of thanks to the many people that serve the town in so many different volunteer positions. And not just the people like us on town boards or committees, but there's an incredible number of coaches, scout leaders, community organization leaders, food pantry workers. There are 200 volunteers at the senior center. And there are an incredible number of volunteers who contribute to the life of our town in so many important ways. I think a general statement acknowledging them, maybe as a matter of practice to be considered by the moderator, could make some sense. I don't really feel that it makes sense to adopt something along the lines of this bylaw. I did not draft a comment or a recommended motion because I wanted to hear the full discussion before I did so. So I don't expect to put this up for a vote tonight because I do want to hear what people have to say. So I will ask other members of the advisory committee to, if they have any comments. And Libby?
Did the Board of Selectmen vote on this article yet, Bob? I
The
know
Board,
it was
the
on.
Board of Selectmen voted no action the other night.
Okay. And did
Three-
you also say, just to, because my note on no action was next to AA. So was this, did they also vote no action on AA?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments from members of the advisory committee? Daveline.
Well, I'm one of those people at town meeting that I'm irritated when people speak who aren't part of the town, like our member of Congress, because I want to get to the work of the town. So I liked last year when he wasn't able to speak because of our time commitments. There's a lot of volunteers, and it just seems to me like this is fraught for things that we might not intend to happen. And I have to say, having watched members of Congress and their behavior and members of state legislatures, I wouldn't be at all surprised if somebody would object to recognizing or thanking someone, because our politics have become so divisive and so nasty in that sense. And it just seems to me you're sort of opening up that possibility. And as somebody who volunteers, I'm not looking for people to thank me when I'm dead. So I did much, that's just the bluntness of it in that sense. I think there are ways to appreciate what people do. And I certainly think the work we do, AdCom, is a lot of work. And I'm amazed at the number of people, even people that I don't know, particularly this year because we've televised everything, who thank me for my work. Even sometimes they say, I disagree with you, but I want to thank you. So I don't really see that it's necessary. And it would just take up valuable time. And it seems to me like it would lead to the possibility of people being angry, hurt, or otherwise not happy with things.
Any other members of the advisory committee? Any members of the public that want to make a comment or a question, raise a question? I don't see anyone. Tom, do you want to say anything in reply that hasn't already been said?
Sure, I just want to address a couple of points that were raised. As far as I know, Bob, we did speak this afternoon. We did, touch on the issue of the AG. And as I had indicated, until you had made it one of your potential points of discussion, I was totally unaware that town council was asked to reach out to the AG's office and talk and speak to them about this. And so it's very hard for me to be able to intelligently respond to it if I don't know exactly what was said. So unfortunately, I can't really speak to that. As I did, Bob will probably acknowledge, I did say to him, I just, again, I can't see what the privacy issue is, because when someone passes away, it's a matter of public record. In terms of, and I appreciate what Ms. Cooper says about the divisiveness of politics, but this is actually, my objective in this is actually more community building and more inclusiveness, and to by recognizing, essentially all these people that put their efforts in, and as Ms. Cooper stated, it's, you got to appreciate the effort, even if you don't necessarily agree with their particular stand on any one particular issue. And in terms of someone actually standing up at a town meeting and objecting to it, I hear this concern. Well, the problem is we've had, multiple years of naming employees, a select group of employees, and not once has anybody ever stood up and said, I object to that employee being named. So I think, the actual evidence that's on that point is, rather than speculative, the actual evidence shows this is not occurring. So rather than engage in speculation, you got to go with, the evidence that you do, the actual evidence that you do have. And in terms of, again, the obligation, I just want to reiterate that there's no affirmative obligation whatsoever on the town to try to get this information, even from the school department. Again, I was very careful to use the phrase known or made known to the town clerk, not known or made known to the town. So it's a very narrow standard as to the knowledge base. And I did it for that reason. I understood that, if you said to the town, I mean, that's used the, known or made known to the town, that's really kind of an unwieldy standard. And in terms of the time issue, again, I get it. Okay, it is what it is. I mean, unfortunately, I was born and raised in this town, and I've attended many town meetings. And one of the things that town meeting has progressed to now is it's really kind of it's a more streamlined town meeting where the goal is to get in and out in a essentially one session. And I understand that. I don't take issue with it. It's how people want to put their time in. I would say, again, I disagree with Bob's position about certain things not being worthy of, warrant article. I mean, in terms of a bylaw, and again, I point out that one of our peer communities, Marblehead, actually has it, and one of our non-peer communities, but which is a very progressive community, the town of Brookline, not just has, for example, I'm not saying this type of particular thing, but they do have. He, for example, used the issue of pledge allegiance. They actually, Marblehead actually does have that in their bylaw, as does the town of Brookline.
I think you've covered these points earlier. We do still have a long night ahead of us.
Okay, and then the final thing is, as far as Libby Claypool asked about the Board of Selectmen's action, I just want to make a point on that. One of the things I had indicated to the selectmen was, because their role in holding these meetings really aren't, as I point out to Bob, aren't really part of the legal process for a town meeting. For example, your hearing tonight is actually something that's required by law. And so I had pointed out to the Board of Selectmen, I said, I don't know whether or not your decision making here is binary, whether it's either you're for it or against it, or you could be open to your view would be that this would be referred to committee, because what I was hearing from the selectmen across the board was it was a worthy, point. It was just an implementation issue in terms of time, and they raised issues like privacy and so forth. Someone feeling possibly left out or someone's feelings being hurt, this type of thing. And they didn't seem to think that that stating that be referred to committee for further vetting was an alternative that they had. And I had this discussion with Bob this afternoon, and I did point out to him that it is, and at least my opinion, it is that a motion to commit or refer is a sub motion that is it's a procedural motion on how to dispose of the warrant article in front of you. So anyways, so last year you guys did do, I think there was a split vote on this board, on this committee on the tree bylaw, where I believe a minority had voted that they wanted it referred to committee. And then what happened was at town meeting, you guys had changed your, I believe you changed your recommended motion to I thought that's what it was, Bob. I thought you stood up and said that you had changed, because that was in fact, I know the petitioner stood up and said it, but then I thought you got up and stated that you guys had voted just prior to town meeting that you changed your recommendation to be that it be referred to committee. And that's in fact the motion, that's the vote that was taken by at town meeting. So what I'm suggesting here is, and again, I'm just trying to do something positive. And if the concern here is some of these privacy issues, administrative issues, etc., I think it's worthy of at least further investigation and referral to a committee to vet it. So I would ask that you consider that as well. Thank you.
We'll leave that to the discussion among the
Yep.
advisory committee when we come to vote. I do want to note as well that this proposed bylaw does call for a vote by citizens at the town meeting. And I suppose that raises questions of, if there's going to be a vote, is there discussion? Does that then raise the question of personalities? I agree with Tom that the selectmen unanimously support the idea of saying thank you. They just don't agree that this bylaw is the way to go. And I'll leave my comments there. We'll put this on for a vote on Tuesday night. And I'll
Bob,
have.
can I
Bob,
just-
there's a hand up.
Can I just respond to your point about the vote? Because we did talk about this afternoon. You had asked me whether or not a vote was required. Because it's a resolution, a vote is required. And just to your concern about personalities, our bylaws provide that you can't get into personalities. So if someone got up, you can't, on any warrant article, anybody could get up and try to engage in personalities, and the moderators would then rule them out of order. So I don't see how a vote on this would be any different than any other vote on any other warrant article. I understand your concern, but going forward, if it was a standing resolution, a vote on that resolution, same principle applies. But I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, the vote would be on named persons. Almost inherently, it involves personalities. If some people are going to vote on it, and someone could stand up and say, I don't want to vote for John Jones because he really killed me when he was on the Historic Districts Commission. But I mean, I think we've had a good discussion of this. I see we have a citizen, Joshua Ross, that's raised his hand. Mr. Ross, could you identify yourself by name and street and direct your questions to the chair, please? Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. Joshua Ross, 125 Wampatuck Road. This was definitely not a issue that I was planning on commenting on tonight, but I feel as a non-appointed volunteer in the town for the better part of the last decade, language and recognition of just appointed volunteers, I feel would put a hierarchy on the volunteerism in this town. You know, I appreciate Mr. Patch's wanting to recognize volunteers. Trust me, I want to do it as well. But on a day where I was part of a group of non-appointed volunteers who got up at 4:30 this morning to get 70 appointments for teachers to get vaccinated, I would argue that non-appointed volunteerism is just as important as appointed volunteerism in this town. And I just also agree that it would cause more unintended consequences than potentially good. So that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Ross. Any other members of the public? Okay, thank you, Tom. Thanks for all the work you put into this, and thank you for wanting to say a bigger thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Okay, so I think, as I said earlier, we're going to defer action on the HMLP because after this was posted, there were later breaking events that indicated that the selectmen weren't going to vote on this till next Tuesday. So we'll put this on for Thursday. And that brings us to Article Z, the town pier article. Libby provided a very detailed comment and recommended motion today. Libby, do you want to address that at all?
I guess I'd just like to say that I sent the original draft earlier today, and then I did send a draft, I think around 6 o'clock maybe, with a couple of changes. And I did mention in my email there, you know, a couple changes to some sentences which came from J.R. Fry, and I found them to be substantive additions, so I included those. They are in the draft that you're looking at. If you all have the redlined or tracked change version, I sent it 6. There is one clarification, something that came up this afternoon, which is in the, I guess, the last paragraph on the first page, and it's relative to timing. So can I just, Bob, would you like me, can I just read what I'd like to change in what's drafted?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Okay, so in that, it's the paragraph that begins with permit level design is complete. So if you go to the third line down, it notes that if this article is approved, construction would begin. And I'd like to change what I have there about the fall of 22. I will just mention that originally, I should have mentioned before I went into the exact change, but Bill Reardon had mentioned at our meeting and also the selectmen meeting that it was his understanding that the construction would begin in the fall of 22. JR had indicated to me an earlier time frame. So I got a late breaking call from Bill before the meeting that both he and JR spoke, and that what they're thinking is the more appropriate time is the winter of, and I've listed as 20 to 21, because JR had kind of originally had the fall of 21, Bill had the fall of 22. So after discussion, they feel like something kind of in the middle is more appropriate. So rather than the construction beginning in the fall of 2022, I would like to, after the word construction could begin, I'd like it to read in the winter of 2021 to 2022, with construction taking 4 to 6 months and project funding in fiscal 23. So I would just like to clarify again, that time frame also is from our town engineer, J.R. Fry, who has been great working with on this article and providing some really good, very specific details. So actually during the earlier part of our AdCom meeting, JR and I had some email correspondence, and I think my question to him is with that 4 to 6 month time frame, technically say you start in January, that could bring us right up to the end of that fiscal year 2022, but it could push past June 30. So as JR mentioned, there'll be his department and working with all the different parties involved will have some control over when that sort of actual part of the project is approved,
closed out.
and wrapped up. And JR, here, I'm going to let you speak to that.
Right. There's an approval process that takes place at the end of construction contracts, and it'll have to be inspected and approved by us. So throughout that process, we have some control over when we receive the last invoice and when we pay it. And we can, if that's the, if there's a preference to have it in FY23, that it's likely to happen regardless, but we can manage it in such a way that that's what takes place.
So that would be the language that I would add to that. Bill, I see your hand up, and since this is really the only point in discussion of this article, Bob, it might make sense to have Bill contribute.
Oh, please.
So I just want to chime in here. First, I need to elaborate because I think the question was asked, maybe it was Victor when we met on Tuesday, what would our timing be? And the reason for some of the changes that Libby and JR are discussing is literally today we have been working with Beals and Thomas to look harder at the permitting schedule. And they are more hopeful and frankly kind of more aggressive than some earlier discussions. So that's why this timeframe has moved up. There's a part of me, who wants this project to move forward and quickly, who is, greatly pleased by that. But I'm also very mindful of not wanting to overpromise and underdeliver. This is something I learned in the biotechnology industry that you don't do. So I've tried to, emphasize, kind of a little softness here in terms of, especially something as uncertain as construction 8 or 9 months from now. I think the other words, Libby, that we had talked about in your revised version was, if this article is approved, construction could begin, and I inserted in earnest, because as early as the winter. I don't want people to sort of say, oh, it's going to be, we're going to see, pilings going into the ground in December and have that not happen. I just want expectations to be not overstated by virtue of this comment.
I have no objection to adding it in earnest, but as we get to the point of our, I guess, once it opens up to the committee to discuss, we can, anyone can let me know. And Bob, I guess I'm giving you a little break here, Bob, because I noticed Dave has a hand up. So
Yes,
I don't know.
I noticed that Dave has a hand up, and Dave, if you're ready to go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick question. And Bill, I was reflecting on your presentation the other night. Thank you so much for that. I just want to ask a basic question, taking it way back up to 50,000 feet. If the sea level was not rising, and I'm not in any way asserting that it's not, but if it was not rising, the town wharf would still need repair, correct?
It clearly would, Dave, and I would say that it would not only need repair, it would need elevation, because the two photos that I showed you in terms of just a normal tide, not even what we call a king tide. King tides, there's water on town pier.
Well, it's because when I'm, like I said, taking a 50,000 foot view and not paying no attention to the woman that shares the house with me who sits on HDC, I looked at your presentation and I look at this comment and I think that it almost, to me, it understates the importance of repairing this thing with or without a sea level rise concern. And that for someone sitting in the town, if they were for one reason or another going to take a position that, oh, well, why are we worried about sea level rise? It's going to rise. It's going to overflood anyhow. my feeling is looking at this project and the other wharves is to say, these wharves need repair, period. We're talking about repairing and resiliency. And I wonder if the repairing component and the critical need of the repair is understated to the detriment of just the importance of this project. In other words, we don't even have to get to a debate really about resilience if someone wants to go there, because these things need to be repaired. And while we're repairing it, it would be madness not to then also, look into the future and solve this bigger problem, which you so eloquently put out. So that's just my 2 cents on kind of framing it, at least for my thick skull.
Dave, you make a very good point, and it's one that, from the 50,000 foot level, I've wanted to make sure that we emphasize to the public. I think in some respects in prior town meetings in prior years, we may have as a committee overstated the flooding, the resilience aspect of this, and perhaps understated exactly what you're saying, which is becoming more and more obvious as each year passes, that construction or repair and rebuilding is becoming more and more critical because the wharves are deteriorating at an expanding, rate. So,
And I would just add that I think maybe my comment was more focused because obviously in the question it's talking about to address safety issues and sea level rise. But Dave, I think your point is very well taken. And I think that it's any of us that drove by that area when there's been storms where there was, water that came over those wharves know that work is needed. And I'm more than happy to note that in a fairly prominent location so that even if somebody decides they don't want to read the entire comment, that they walk away with that. And I think what I would also, as we're talking about this feel, would be an important other point to mention on that is, and I would probably have to defer to somebody at the town or maybe Bill, is I would venture to guess it's been many, many years, if not decades, since these were either last touched or last really in any significant way to help with the problem that we're now seeing. So I am more than happy to put a fairly prominent comment about that because as it stands, it's an issue, even as you said, Dave, if the seas were never rising. And I think that I would ask somebody, and I think it's important to note in here how long it's been since any work has ever been done on these piers.
I can just answer you in terms of your question, Libby. The answer is for particularly Town Wharf, which we're Town Wharf, Town Pier Wharf. The only thing that has been done has been an occasional backfilling, behind the stones, and some asphalt put down just to flatten things out so that one could walk past. There's been no substantive work on any of the 3 wharves, and specifically this wharf in my lifetime in Hingham, which is 60 odd years.
And I bet it goes further back than that. So I'll see if I can do a little research on that, but I totally agree with that point. And that's the only thing from the version that I sent out tonight, Bob, that was not included was really just on that timing. And I did get that feedback directly from JR and Bill. So I don't really have anything else to add on the article unless people have questions now that they've seen the comment.
Well, we had a very complete discussion the other night. We've had
Yep.
a good supplementation tonight. Andy,
Could you just read again the language that you're
Yes.
proposing to insert?
So it's the sentence that begins permit level design. Right after where it says 6 to 9 months, it will say, if this article is approved, construction could begin in earnest in the winter of 2021 to 2022, with construction taking, probably should say approximately 4 to 6 months, and project funding in fiscal 2023.
I guess I don't understand what project funding in 2023.
Because I think it's likely to be, even if it's a day after July 1st of 2022, that's fiscal 23. So if it's starting that, over that winter and spans and goes beyond June 30, which as we just heard earlier in this meeting, things, often timelines, there's sliding of timelines, then, but again, that's, I guess, a little bit of a,
I just don't understand I don't understand the meaning of the phrase with project funding in 2023.
Do you mean
Because
the
I
bond issue,
believe-
Libby? Do
Yeah,
you mean the
pardon me?
bond issue? Do you
Yeah.
mean the bond issue?
Yeah, I guess I could say the bond issue, because I wanted to confirm with you, Bob, that they issue the bond anticipation notes, the bands, in advance. So really, it's just interest only until I believe the project is complete, the bond is floated, and then at that point is when technically the project and the bond is floated, is when it's fully funded. Is that correct, Bob?
That's my understanding, yeah.
Okay.
And of course, we have Tom Mayo on the line. I think, Julie, did you have a question too?
Well, I was just wondering if that needed to be exactly when the bonding would occur, if that needed to be exactly in the comment.
I'm happy to do whatever the committee feels. Tom, Bob, do you mind if I have Tom chime in on that? Because that's kind of a key aspect of what we're talking about
Yeah,
here.
the way you laid it out, Libby, is the way we normally do it.
Okay. So, I mean, the reason I say that, Andy, is that, even if it slipped one day to July 1st, now we're in the next fiscal year. And as JR said, there's a lot of control the town has over that timing. And I feel that it's like, it'd be less, why be so aggressive to mean that it would have to be done by June 30 when it's just starting over that winter, and it's very likely to span and go beyond July 1st for the final bond issue.
Yeah, no, I don't have any quarrel with that. I just find it, I didn't know what you meant, and I just found it confusing. So
Julie?
if others understand it, then that's fine.
Well, I'm just wondering again why it has to be in there because I just never seen it in previous articles. I just feel like it's just this extra detail that.
But as far as when it would be funded, Julie?
When it would go to bond. I just
Well,
don't.
I think it's a material project. It's a large amount. I think there's hopes and possibilities of getting significant grants, but I think, my opinion as, the liaison to HDC and someone who's spent several years on some of these, different warrant articles for HDC, to me, that's a material part of this article. And somebody who's reading this is, okay, well, when does this have to be paid for? When is it,
I do think citizens are also watching debt exclusions and what the overall impact is going to be. So I think it is probably a good thing in the interest of transparency to indicate when the funding is likely to hit. I could see using the word probably in FY23, which gives a little more wiggle room.
And Bob, also, a point I think is very, that I would just like to bring up to everybody that I think may have been also something that at one point when Bill talked about timing, and I know he had a meeting with the chair of the board of selectmen, is that, we all know if we're really looking at timing and debt exclusions, that they're anticipated to be a fall 2022 town meeting, which could potentially be to actually fund foster school and for the public safety facility. So now we're talking about, in a sense, the timing of this, that fall meeting would be within fiscal 2023. So again, that would allow any potential, debt that the town's preparing for to kind of be all within that fiscal year for this, in addition to those other large projects. So I think that timing, in my mind, sort of dovetails nicely.
Andy, your hand is still up. Are you?
That's a mistake.
Okay. And Victor?
Just a quick similar comment I made on N. Libby, I'd suggest you don't bury your lead and start the comment with what the requested amount is. Just a suggestion. I think it's helpful to the reader.
Okay, I was trying to kind of warm the audience up, Victor, and then drop the bomb.
Right away. That's what they want to know.
Okay.
Any members of the public that have any comment or question? I'm not seeing any hands. I suggest that we proceed to a vote on the recommended motion and that Libby can provide us the revised comment for our review and comments at a later meeting. Does that make sense to people?
Yeah.
Okay, so Libby, do you want to make the recommended motion? I don't
Yeah.
think you need to, I don't think you need to read the bond language.
Yeah, I won't read the whole thing. And so Nancy provided one bookend to our article hearings with a vote with a lot of deferrals in between. And I'm happy to have my Article Z be the other bookend of something that we're voting on tonight. And so I think the key part of the recommendation that I want to read is that the town appropriate an amount of up to $5,650,000 to be expended by the Board of Selectmen for the repair, reconstruction of the town pier wharf to address safety issues and sea level rise.
Okay, and then there's a bond authorization.
And it is a borrowing note, so then it has the standard borrowing language after that.
And the standard bond
Okay.
language. Is there a second?
Second.
Dave's got a question before we. do
No,
the-
I can take it up in discussion now that it's been seconded, I guess. Is that okay?
Is there any further discussion?
Yes. I was just going to wonder if we might add, Libby, in your recommended motion, words to the effect of, necessary repairs as well. I mean, the safety to me is a nice, but it doesn't really hit me between the eyes in terms of kind of the point I made earlier in terms of the recommended motion and why we're doing this. I'm open
Yeah,
to
the only
whatever
thing I
language
would
is
say,
appropriate.
and maybe I always thought that the standard protocol was kind of to repeat the question and have it be that same language. So I would defer to Bob for a comment on that. I didn't think there could be real significant differences.
I don't, well, we do have significant differences a lot of times, but I think something like the necessity of the repairs is better explained in the comment than.
Just to, sorry to interrupt you, Bob. It does say that for repair / reconstruction of the pier to address safety issues. So, I mean, like I said, maybe I'm getting wrapped around the axle on the language of the comment or of the motion, and I'm prepared to drop it. I just wanted to raise it because it strikes me that it's right there. And
Dave, what you're focusing on, is exactly what we as a committee worked through as we tried to put the warrant article forward. We tried to use those words to touch all of the points, and safety and reconstruction were the ones that were connected.
Okay, then I withdraw. I'm good. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Not seeing any hands. I think we come to vote. Victor.
Aye.
Andy.
Aye.
Julie.
Aye.
Dave.
Aye.
Daveline.
Aye.
Libby.
Aye.
Evan.
Aye.
Oh, there you are.
I was sleeping.
Did you have a vote?
I said aye. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear you. Sorry. Aaron.
Aye.
George.
Aye.
Kristen.
Aye.
Brenda. Brenda Black.
She froze.
I think you're frozen, Brenda.
No.
No. All right, yes. Aye.
Thank you. Alan.
Aye.
Nancy.
Aye.
I think I got everybody.
Tina's with us, I think. I think I saw Tina here earlier.
Aye.
All right. Thank you, Tina. Okay. Thank you, Bill.
14-0.
Thank you, JR. Thank you, Libby, for all the work that went into this.
Bob, could I just ask a question? Bob?
Does it relate to something on the agenda?
Yeah, well, it relates to what we've just voted. At our
Okay.
last meeting, Annie McElhaney made the very generous suggestion that perhaps the advisory committee would also
Oh,
provide
yes.
a letter of support to OEEA. And I just hope that might still happen by tomorrow, because that's when we will file.
Bill, Julie is doing her best Vanna White right now. I don't know if that's the right analogy, but
Yes.
she's got a lovely letter that has been drafted and I believe approved by Bob, but I will.
Thank you, Libby, for preparing that and for circulating the letter to be sent by me and by the Board of Selectmen. Do you need it sent overnight? Or can I email it?
Electronically is just fine.
Can someone provide me with the email address to send it to?
Directly to me, and I include it with the packet.
Oh, okay, wonderful. All right, excellent. And
So Bob, what about signature? Are you going to have an opportunity to give that, to sign it and scan it maybe?
I'll sign it and scan it in color and send it to JR first thing in the morning.
Fabulous.
Okay.
But Bob,
Yeah.
I just want to say thank you to you and to the committee and particularly to Libby in working through this. This has been a long effort and we are very appreciative of all your time, particularly on Tuesday night when you gave us a great deal of attention.
And likewise, and you deserve the attention. It's an important.
Yeah, thanks,
article.
Bill. It's been a years effort, and I appreciate all the help you gave me on the work that I did on my end, and your committee, and JR in particular. You've been great to work with on this recently, and thanks so much to everybody.
And
All right.
it's my understanding, without taking another roll call vote, that your last vote expressed your authority to me to speak on all of your behalf by sending that letter. If anybody disagrees, let them speak now or forever hold their peace. Thank you all. And we're actually going to depart slightly from the agenda order because we are fortunate to have Tom Mayo with us tonight, our town administrator. And Tom suggested to me this afternoon that it made sense for him to go through his budget recommendations before we got to any further discussion of forecast financial policy, fund balance, override, finance and tax planning tools. So Tom, I am going to turn the floor over to you. Do you need to be able to share your screen to?
So Ms. Montague, I believe, is going to take care of that. She will be my joint or my co-presenter tonight. I think
Okay,
you all know Michelle, right?
yes, welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. If Tyler would be so kind to make me a co-host, please.
Can I do that, Michelle, or as a
You-
co-host?
I'm not sure if you can. I will text
No.
Tyler in case he stepped away momentarily.
Bob did distribute the presentation.
Yeah, we can just email it to Bob, Michelle.
Okay.
It's possible.
Tyler, are you there?
He's muted.
Tyler?
Tyler's left the building.
He's looking for a deferment.
Dave's not here.
Bob, as a co-host, you can't.
Yeah, that's what we're doing now, I think.
Yeah.
Let me, Michelle, were you able to
Yeah.
email that to Bob?
I did. I think you have to be a host to make someone a co-host, but
Okay.
No,
Bob,
I'm
if-
saying
asking.
Bob can now share it, right?
Bob, if you want to be our driver of slides.
He is a slide driver.
You just sent them to me by email.
I did. I'll try to,
Michelle, this is only going to take 12 more minutes.
I'm trying to get Tyler.
I've got the slides open on my
Thank you.
screen.
Thanks,
And
Bob.
As I understand it, if I go to share screen. How's that?
Wow.
Perfect.
Very
Look at
impressive,
Tell your
Bob.
grandkids.
Well done. Okay, Mr. Curley, if you could advance to the second slide. This is going to be fun.
Bob, can you
Thank you,
hit the
Bob. Yeah, that's good.
slideshow?
Oh, you can do, if you do, go up to view at the top left.
Although, can
And then
I just
do-
like, maybe this is actually okay, because if you make it too big, you're going to lose half the, you're going to lose the right side with all of your screens, aren't you?
You can do read mode and I think it'll look,
Okay.
or full screen mode or read mode. Either one.
Did you just lose part of the slide?
No.
Oh, okay. I've got pictures in front
We
of it.
did.
Yeah, me too.
So should I?
Whatever, maybe just hit escape.
I mean, I can just scroll from slide to slide.
Yeah, no, this is probably good.
So-
We can make this work.
Yeah, go to read mode.
Yeah, try read mode.
That is read mode.
Oh.
Okay. Are we ready?
Yeah, is that where you want to be?
Yep, for now, yep.
Okay.
So a couple of things, just as a preface. This is obviously late in coming. My recommendations would normally come to you with your budget books in November. However, given the current economic climate with the pandemic, we were the revenue picture was very unclear, obviously. So until that revenue picture clarified, we weren't able to produce my recommendations against those of what's in your book, which is representing the recommendations of the department heads. So I'll start with that, and then I'm just going to give you'll see at the bottom of this slide that it states that if a recommendation is not in this document from that is in your books, then that means that I'm not recommending something that a department head had recommended. Okay. And then there's a couple of those, but there's also obviously some new recommendations in here that were not in your books. So that's just a little bit of a background. Also, I wanted to let you know that everything that you're going to see tonight, again, because we're doing this so late in the process, everything you're going to see tonight has been removed from the base budget. These are all additional recommendations. All of these have been removed from the forecast document that I believe you saw on Tuesday. So just so you know, these are all outside of that document right now. The other thing I would tell you is that, and Michelle will get to this later in the presentation, but there is an additional, in addition to these prioritized 8 recommendations, there is an additional $500,000 to boost the capital project. You all have heard me speak in past years of the townwide capital as being a structural deficit. We are, and again, I don't want to steal Michelle's thunder, but we're regularly in pretty bad trouble, as I think Libby can attest, when it comes to funding our capital program. So That said, we can jump down to the next slide, and I will try to get through these concepts pretty quickly. The first,
Wait, Tom, 1 second. Bob, I think Tyler made me a co-host. I'm happy to relieve you of your duties if you'd rather.
that might be helpful.
So then you
Happy-
can relax.
happy to have the real expert doing this.
So you'll just have to stop sharing.
So
Bob.
I'll stop sharing.
Okay, let me grab this one. Can everyone see that okay?
Yep, that's perfect. Yep.
All right, let me. All right, thank you.
There we go. Excellent. Thank you very much, Bob, for your able assistance. Okay. So this first recommendation is a bit of a change in our organizational structure, but it's become very clear that the organization has outgrown that prior structure. We need to reorganize at the top in order to accommodate the growth throughout the organization. And we'll show you a couple of slides here in a second that kind of show this visually. But right now there are some 23 departments that report directly to me, and that doesn't help them or me in my office, specifically myself and Michelle. So they're not getting the support that they need, and we're not able to familiarize and be able to make the decisions that need to be made along the way in any kind of a convenient or efficient manner. So the concept here is to add an additional assistant town administrator. Right now we have one. We're going to move, this model would move us to a 2 assistant town administrator model, which is done in a couple of our peer communities. And the idea would be that we would make one the ATA in charge of finance and one ATA of operations. We're asking specifically for funding for the ATA for finance, as I would expect the existing position that Michelle currently holds would become, in essence, repurposed as the ATA for operations. So what the ATA for finance will do is help us to increase our leadership and our capacity, efficiency, oversight, communication, responsiveness. All of those things are right now struggling. The total request is for $137,000. That is the anticipated early estimate salary based on what other towns have done. So if we jump down. So this is the current structure. This, I think, drills it home. We would have done it as a flat line, as you would normally see, except it wouldn't fit and allow you to still be able to read it. So we did it vertically. But the idea here is right now, all of these departments and their department heads, and often their assistant department heads, when they need any assistance from the 3rd floor, they come directly either to myself or Michelle. And it's, they have no guidance over who can best help them. It's, whoever answers the phone or answers their email first in too many instances. Now, obviously, there are some matters that require my attention or that Michelle traditionally handles, but it's less organized and structured than it should be. So we'll just jump forward to the next one so you can kind of see the concept and how we want to diversify. So again, the ATA of finance will manage, have direct reports in all of the finance departments. That's accounting, assessing, and treasurers, as well as some of the, as well as the non-public facing departments, administration up in our office, the clerk's office, facilities, HR, and IT. So those departments would report directly through the ATA. The ATA of operations would have what we often refer to as the 2nd floor departments, our regulatory boards and the like, as well as some of the more traditional public facing departments, such as the COA or the Elder Services Senior Center, staff, library rec, country club, and the veterans departments. You'll notice I am still keeping the big 3 departments, DPW, fire, and police, reporting directly through the town administrator, as well as our new position of the water superintendent, which is currently a 1-person department. in theory anyway, soon become a 2-person department. But because of the functions of those departments, they will be, I'm anticipating and recommending that they continue to report directly through me. I will state that this does not in any way highlight or organize for us our management and support of the 400 volunteers that Bob mentioned earlier, and all the different boards that we support along the way. We will work on that as well. Again, though, it would be nice to have an extra set of hands, qualified and skilled set of hands to help us with that. So I guess that's all in the ATA. So we can jump forward to the next one.
So the
Michelle?
second recommendation that we are making for FY22 is a full-time mental health clinician for the police department. Right now, or for the past few years, we've been sharing a person funded by a grant with the city of Weymouth. And so our police department has benefited from their services for 8 hours a week, but it's simply not enough. We are requesting a separate full-time person to be able to assist with different mental health related matters. This person can help people in crisis and provide services, referrals, resources for things like substance abuse, domestic violence, and other situations. It's something that we have been hearing from very vocally from our police chief and his team, that this is a huge issue that the department's seeing. And we've also been hearing directly from the community for this need. So that's why we are prioritizing it for the coming fiscal year.
So this is the senior planner position that we're recommending. So if many of you are aware, and if the rest aren't, I apologize if you haven't heard this to date, but Mary Savage Dunham, who was our long-term town planner or community planning director out of the planning department, resigned back at the end of December, moving on to sunnier climates. However, that resignation changed. That came after, that was in December. As you know, we distributed our books in November, your budget books in November. My original concept was to add an assistant town planner to this department, and that's when Mary was there. When Mary resigned, I wanted to take the opportunity to rethink the functions of that department and to try to make it as efficient and responsive to the community needs as possible. So what Michelle and I, in consultation with members of the planning board and the entire planning board, we had a special public hearing specifically for this topic. We talked with members of the ZBA. We talked with all the staff on the second floor, our real estate attorney, our general counsel. The Board of Selectmen, we've talked about this ad nauseum with many folks for the last couple of months to try to find the best solution that will work for the needs down there. And what we're coming up with is, and what we believe will work the best, is adding, instead of an assistant town planner, we're going to recommend that we add a position of senior planner to the planning department, and that would come in addition to remaking or rethinking the community planning director. So let me just go into that for a second. The community planning director would change scope. The job description will change a bit. That will change the scope and parameters of their work. They would no longer be the primary staff for the planning board, and they would in large part focus on long-range planning efforts. South Hingham, think downtown Hingham, the harbor development, harbor walkway work, the shipyard and its development processes, large building developments, et cetera. Think of that kind of effort. They would also help to coordinate Michelle, what's the term?
No, a project review.
Yeah,
process.
I can never remember the name of the committee. The Plan Review Committee. Thank you. The Plan Review Committee that Hingham used to employ many years ago and hasn't for some time. But we want to reinstitute that. Have this person, the community planning director, would staff that and organize that function, which would ensure proper communications across the second floor. That would free up that person to do that work. by taking them out of staffing the second floor, staffing the planning board. That's where this position comes in. The senior planner position would be primarily the staff for the planning board. They would deal with all of the daily, the daily, weekly applications that come before the board, work through things like, well, you see here, things like the Amazon application before them now. So some of these, issues that come before the board on a routine matter. By adding this capacity, we'd be able to deal with a lot of the long-term planning stuff, as well as the short-term immediate issues that sometimes get short-shrifted because of a lack of staff. So by adjusting those positions, the community planning director, and by adjusting that grade and bringing that grading down, and then changing the assistant town planner to a senior planner, which was a slightly higher grade than the assistant town planner was planned for, we ended up with a net change to the departmental budget of $63,403.
The next recommendation, there were two heavy equipment operators requested by our DPW superintendent for the transfer station. We're recommending one for FY22. Basically, there's a lot of services and functions that are happening at the transfer station, and that those have increased over the last few years because of the growth in the community. But our staffing structure hasn't changed, and we're not able to accomplish all of the work that needs to get done at the transfer station in the 4 days that it's open during regular hours. So we end up paying folks on overtime to accomplish the work there. And we're proposing bringing someone in, especially to help with scale operations and the trucking operations, to help manage that more effectively. So that total request is about $52,000. Oh, on the next one. The field maintenance program that we're proposing this year, and you likely heard directly from Mark Thorell about this. This came directly from the athletic fields and outdoor court study that we did with CPC funds over the last year or so. We had hired Weston and Sampson as the consultant to lead that project, and Mark Thorell led our field study working group that had representatives from the rec department, our office, the school, the country club, DPW, and the Hingham Sports Partnership to do this work together with the consultant. This proposal, basically the study says that before we look at making bigger capital investments in our fields, things like turf fields or reorienting fields, doing other accessibility improvements, we need to make sure that we're adequately taking care of what we have now, and that's going to protect future investments. So the study recommended centralizing our field maintenance program under one entity, and we're proposing to do that through the rec department. So this would be one program that would support the Board of Selectmen, recreation, and school fields. Mark has broken down the estimated costs here between some seasonal employees and then outsourced contracts for some of the field applications and the other expenses. And the request that we're presenting of $241,000 is net of revenue offsets from the rec department, outside groups, and the school department through their fees. This also, what this doesn't take into account too, and that's separate, is DPW continuing to mow the fields and do the trash removal and weed whacking around all of our outdoor facilities.
So this recommendation is a bit of a repackaging effort from a proposal that you had heard from Michelle and I last year. Back then, we were talking about a PIO, the Public Information Officer. It was not funded. However, the need became more acute, obviously, during the course of the pandemic. And one of the during the past year, we had this issue with the MBTA. Remember the proposed closings of Greenbush and the ferry. And one of the things that came from that was the town of Cohasset engaged a company to help with their communications, and the towns of Hull and Hingham signed on with them to help us communicate successfully with the public on what the towns and the local governments, et cetera, were doing in an effort to to try to change the T's approach, which was successful. And in that effort, watching that effort occur, it became clear to Michelle and I that that was a very streamlined and professional way to get the level of communication to the public that we were hoping to get out of the PIO. And then we did a little investigation to try to determine how much that would cost on an annual basis. And lo and behold, it was $35,000, which was significantly lower than what we were requesting for a PIO as an FTE last year. And of course, that also would have required a benefited position. So some, obviously, what's listed here are some of the benefits I think we would get from this. But I think that this would be a time saver for us. It would be a way to professionalize the efforts and really to help us in crisis mode, but also really to help engage the public on our daily interactions. One of the things I tell the department heads all the time is they're all doing really wonderful work, and sometimes it's difficult to communicate that with the public. And often the public is only dealing with us when there's a problem. So I don't like that. I would prefer that everyone understand really what their local government is doing on a regular basis. And this seems like a good way to do that. So we're recommending $35,000 for a communications consultant.
The next two requests are structural deficits that the current Board of Selectmen and past Boards of Selectmen have asked us to try to address over time. So the first one is the legal services budget. What you see here in blue are the actual expenses over the last 10 years, and in green, the budgeted amounts. We are recommending, so we looked at the 5-year average cost over the last 5 years, and we're recommending funding that at 80% of the level. So that would be, we would need about $138,000 in FY22. Bob had asked a good question before about whether any of this had water expenses in it, and we did have it in our FY20 figures at first, so we've removed that, and that's why this request came down a little bit. Similarly, for snow and ice, another structural deficit we have, and one that often we have to pull from fund balance at the end of the year to cover. You can see the blue is the actual. This is something that's completely outside of the town's control, as is many of the legal expenses. On the legal, we've taken some steps to control some of those expenses, like instituting office hours with some of our council and our department heads to try to proactively address issues. Snow is completely out of our control. So a year like 2012 was pretty light, maybe 200,000, but then everyone remembers Snowmageddon in 2015, where that was almost $2 million cost to the town. So we're proposing the same thing here, looking at the 5-year average cost, and 80% of that, we would need about $63,000 to budget at that 80% level. So then to look overall for the level services budget for the municipal side of the house, we're looking at a 3.1% increase. And I know that this percentage looks crazy in Articles 4 and 5. The $705,000 that's in there this year, about $140,000 of that is for the wage and classification study that we just undertook over the last year or so, and that was recently approved by the Personnel Board. This is the first time in 20 years that we've done a study for our permanent, non-union, non-contract employees, and that study is recommending, as the town's practice has been for many years, making sure that our salary grades are about the midpoint of our 19 benchmark communities. So we're using the 51st percentile for all of that data. The last time we did this was 2001. And that amount of money represents what we need to get the 90 or so people covered by the study up to that midpoint in FY22. The Personnel Board has recommended that the new wage and classification structure go into effect on June 1st. So that is part of Article 4 in their report. So hopefully we will be able to do that in a few months. And then the other amount in the 705 is the cost of living increases budgeted for all of the unsettled contracts. And I believe 5 of the 6 are unsettled right now. That's why that number is so large. You can see if you look at the public safety increase, for example, it's just not in there. So the 2% is down below instead of up there. And then if we compare this level services request to the request with our recommendations in it, the increase rises to about 5.8% based on the list that we just showed you. The other request that Tom mentioned in the first slide was capital outlay. We're proposing adding $500,000 to the capital budget. We did a study last year with some Harvard Kennedy School students. They did an analysis of our capital process and also looked at what our benchmark communities do. And they found that every year about half of the department requests are funded, which leads to a lot of deferrals. Tom always talks about the DPW Randy's deferral sheet keeping him up at night. So I've screenshotted it here to give an example of every D on this list recommends a year that a vehicle was due for replacement and we weren't able to do it just because there's simply not enough funding in the capital outlay budget. That is another structural deficit in our overall budget. And the study recommended that the town find some new ways to raise revenue for this budget. On the next slide. So we're proposing as part of this year, adding $500,000. Our financial policy says that the capital outlay budget should be between 2 and 5% of the town's operating budget. And the current level services request of 2.6 million represents 2.8%. We have been adding that $100,000 every year to the capital budget. It's just simply not enough to keep up with, to allow us to take care of the facilities, the vehicles, and the equipment that the town has in an appropriate way. Adding the $500,000 would bring us up to 3.3%, so more closer to the middle of that range, and it would support municipal and school departments. It's townwide. Then doing a quick look at the shared services comparison with and without a recommendation. So the level services request shows a decrease. That's mostly because of the debt that's retiring off the debt service schedule. But of course, as we issue new debt, that will be added to. Unclassified, the big increase here is really because of our property and liability insurance that went up a ton, or will go up a ton in FY22 based on some recent claims. Once we add the capital request in, it jumps to 0.2%. And you can see there that it's adding about 25% to the capital outlay budget. And then just to recap, Tom would walk through again.
Yeah, again, these are our prioritized list of additional recommendations. And just to restate what I said at the very beginning, that this has all been actively removed from the forecast that you received on Tuesday. So this is not in the in that forecast right now. That showed a $274,000 surplus. Once we removed all the additional requests, as is our practice at this time of year, trying to get to a balanced budget. I will say that we have a meeting scheduled next week with some folks to try to with the school department and some folks from this board to try to help us walk through of these recommendations and of the school's recommendations, what we can afford within a potential override or as part of a potential override and the like. But that's a topic for the next item, agenda item.
And I'll just note that this slide deck is different from the original slide deck that I sent to you all. And I will email a copy of this slide deck to all of you in the morning.
The change is the legal change that Bob had caught, where we had to remove the water and COVID expenses from FY20 there.
And I'd suggest at this point that Tom might want to update us on the federal funds situation.
Sure, to the extent I can, Bob. So obviously the American Recovery Act has been passed. I believe, was it signed by the president today? I believe it was.
Yes, it was.
Yep. So that's all really great news. The preliminary estimate from Congressman Lynch's office is that the town of Hingham will have approximately $2.4 million in municipal funds made available. Now, what we don't know is we have some sense of when. Some portion of it will need to be spent in the first 60 days, it looks like, with another year beyond that of making the funds available for another year beyond that. The details are very fuzzy still. We haven't had a summary from the Mass Municipal Association, who will ultimately do that and provide us all municipalities with the details. For instance, I don't know if that $2.4 million number incorporates a school allocation too. That I know the act was intending to include. So that it's possible that is in there, but I get a feeling that perhaps it isn't. We have that question pending right now with the Congressman's office. I'm not sure that they are clear yet either. This is all just so new and happening so fast, and it's such a big bill that I think there's a little bit of everyone scrambling a little bit, trying to understand the implications to us. But preliminarily, $2.4 million.
Tom, from what I read, half of the money was going to go out in the first 60 days, but was not required to be spent in that 60 days.
Yeah.
And then the other half was going to go out a year later. And that I think all funds were going to be spent by the end of 2024.
Yep.
I think that's the way I understood it.
You mean the half of the 2.4?
That's my understanding, Andy, yeah.
So 1.2 comes this year?
If it's the first 60 days, that means we need to spend them in FY21, and we're going to have to look at some ways that can be done. These are the detail levels that I really am not comfortable getting into, just because I don't want anyone leaving here with any impressions that I know what I'm talking about on this bill, because I absolutely do not. Want to be clear about that.
Well, it's not my understanding that the funds would have to be spent, but they'd have to be accounted for as a receipt in FY21. So presumably at the end of the year, there'd be a surplus, and the funds presumably would go into fund balance. But I do think that may be a question for refinement as we go on.
Yeah, there were probably 20 pages of details from the CARES Act on how that works.
So did anyone have questions about the town administrative budget recommendations? Andy, I see your hand, and then Victor.
I have 3 questions. Actually, 1 question. I'll premised on the assumption that fund balance seems to be a bit of a black hole, in the sense of it's easier to put money in there than to ever get it out. And there seems to be this $6 million unrestricted amount over and above the policy maximum of 20%. So I guess my question is, could we take some money from fund balance to put it into the capital account for the 500,000 that you're talking about? And likewise, if we have this excess fund balance and we can overspend for snow and ice and for legal, why don't we leave those budgets with the structural deficits they have, and in anticipation of using money each year from fund balance to make up the deficits until such time as that excess fund balance, if you'll pardon the expression, is reduced.
Bob, you want me to take that?
Yeah, I think that's a question for you, Tom.
Sure. Thank you. And this is how we connect when we can't connect through phone tag, right?
Yep.
In these public meetings. I apologize for that, by the way. Yes. Yeah. So all 3 great questions. There's a strong opinion that that fund balance is appropriate for especially snow and ice. For the legal structural deficit. That's how it's been done for many years. It certainly could continue that way. And that this is what we're recommending would bring it to within 80% of the 5-year average. if we wanted to try to correct it. We're identifying it as, in fact, a structural deficit within the operating budget, but it's been funded that way for years. I will say the $500,000 boost to capital, yeah, absolutely, that could be used. That could be done through fund balance if it was going to be intended as a one-year bump. Once you build, if you're going to build your annual capital budget by that amount, which is what this recommendation is, then you wouldn't want to use fund balance for that. But yeah, I mean, certainly, I think Libby would agree. $500,000 once is better than no money ever. So it's the operating budget that I think matters the most, and that's certainly the dream. But baby steps, of course, is also appropriate sometimes.
And Bob, I don't know if this is an appropriate time to mention that, that is something that I did ask about, not just for the 500,000, but for a larger portion of capital, because that is within the town's financial policy. But, I think it's, the fact remains that to the extent that we rely on fund balance for that going forward to fund Article 6, we're permanently, I'd have to say we're getting back to the days before I was on capital over 10 years ago, where I always referred to capital as kind of the redheaded stepchild, the plug figure, whatever you want to say. All the money went to operating, and whatever was kind of left at the end of the day went to capital. And we saw where that got us. It got us a boatload of deferred requests, and that we're still kind of working our way through. So that is just not a long-term answer, because you can't rely on, with a budget of almost $3 million each year, you can see where that would get exhausted, that excess we're talking about over that max, in short order. So it's not a permanent fix, is the bottom line.
I just want to point to something that's in our financial policy. The 20% ceiling on the fund balance we want to keep isn't just a one-year ceiling. The financial policy talks about a likelihood that fund balance is going to remain over 20% for 5 years. And I will tell you that study is presently being undertaken to try to forecast in some way the likely levels of fund balance as a percentage of TAE over the next 5 years. So Victor, did you have a question, or did that disappear?
I'm okay. I'm set.
Okay. George, you're on mute.
Sorry, my bad. Quick question, Tom, and maybe it's too much in the details at this point, but looking at the rec proposal,
yep.
I know the schools maintain a revolving fund for building for fields rentals. Would you envision that the funds in that account would be transferred to the jurisdiction of the rec if this proposal is adopted?
Michelle, are these the fees structure that we were talking with John about?
Some of them are fees. I'm not sure if they are part of the revolving fund or not. But in Mark Thorell and John's conversations, they talked about 75,000. That was part fees, part an operating expense that the school budget already has. But it's not all of what they spend on field and field maintenance, because they still have equipment and other costs and needs and things to replace over there.
So would the schools still maintain that account going forward, do you think?
I think they would. The rest of the account, we're just talking about a piece, the 75,000 of their revenue would come to rec through this program, so that the applications, the personnel, et cetera, could be applied for all of the fields across the town.
And the rec would have responsibility for maintaining the fields then going forward, just
Correct.
as the rest of the fields.
Yeah, that was the idea, was to centralize as much as we could into one place.
All right, thank you.
And Libby.
Thanks, Bob. I have three quick questions for Tom and Michelle. One of them is also along with that field maintenance program. I noticed on your sheet it's about 241,000. And you mentioned, Michelle, I think it was that was in advance of any of the larger field project that would be done. But
Yes.
one question I have for the purpose of us as we evaluate that fact that we are potentially using, in some cases, one-time sources to plug potentially ongoing or permanent requests. Is that something that we could anticipate being recurring until a larger project is done? Or is that 241 kind of a one and done until something larger is done for the fields?
This is a recurring cost. Basically, it's your annual maintenance of how we take care of the fields every single year. So it's the infield grooming, it's the irrigation, the fertilizers, et cetera. It's the recommendation was that we get that in place first, so that when we do some of these other renovations to fields down the line, that we're taking care of everything adequately, so that we're protecting those future investments. They were basically saying there's no point in, changing the orientation of X field or improving Y field if we're not then going to care for it properly. You're just going to have to spend. Your investment is not going to last as long if we're not maintaining it. So this is supposed to be an annual maintenance effort that would be centralized under rec to take care of them.
So that would be ongoing then. And
Yes.
then I would just like to point out, as the voice of capital here, that I know that there were hopes that it was always going to be increased to 100. Well, not always, but over the last few years, $100,000 a year. But I would just like to point out that there were. And I don't know, I don't remember exactly, Tom, I'm not sure you do, but there was
It was at least one.
There was
Right.
at least one, could have been 2 years where maybe we only got 50,000. So I just want to point out for everybody that's listening that we didn't always get that, $100,000 increase that we were hoping for. And that's just something to mention. Michelle, I think you spoke about in the unclassified, the increase in the insurance premium and how that premiums due to loss history is going way up. I'm just curious, what were some of the larger claims that caused that premium to go way up? And I guess also, can you confirm if that's unclassified, then you're saying that premium cost is under the municipal budget?
No, it's a shared, we consider it a shared cost because it's for all of the town's property and liability insurance, and the claims were related to at least a flood and a fire at different schools over the past year or so. But
unclassified, meaning it's not considered a municipal or a school expense. It's unclassified.
It's a shared expense, kind of like capital, debt service, employee benefits, where it's it's for both municipal and school departments.
Okay.
Those costs are going up a lot, so we are going to look at possibly going out to bid in the coming year for a new insurance contract. Although they're exempt from 30B, we need to make sure that these types of increases are actually consistent with the market, because sometimes we wonder, why do we have insurance if it's just, if we're not, we get paid for a claim, but then the premiums go up so much that it doesn't feel like maybe it's the best deal.
Okay, so but those largest claims you said were both a fire and was it electrical? I forget what you said. Fire.
Those are the claims, Libby, that we've seen the last few years for the school losses, the property damage losses that we voted on.
Okay, so those were the school department mostly. And again, that's an unclassified, so that you said it gets shared. But as far as like when we look at the percentage of the town budget that's, say, school versus municipal, where does it fall then? Do you go and allocate that out?
We don't allocate the liability insurance. I think that's too hard to split. I'm not sure we have a breakdown of like the different properties.
So I guess getting back to my original question then, that is grouped in with the municipal numbers.
No, but we keep the three numbers separate. So there's municipal, school, and shared costs.
Other shared. Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, I didn't understand that. Thanks for the clarification. I'm all set.
Andy, did you have another question or comment? Your hand is still up.
I did not. I apologize.
Okay. Any other members of the advisory committee? Libby, your hand's up again. Oh, you're gone. All right. All right, I'll open it up to the members of the general public, and I'll recognize Priya Howell. Please state your name and address. Priya, are you there? We can't hear you if you're speaking.
It's on mute.
Okay, well, I don't see a mute sign on her name. I definitely see the hand raised. And
It did. It's going in and out.
okay, well, if she comes back, we'll let her ask her question. Mr. Ross.
Thanks. Well, Joshua Ross, 125 Marlborough Road. I just have a quick question about the fund balance percentages since you were talking about. I had, during the selectmen meeting this week, on their weekly financial presentations, they went over, forecasting. And one of the things that was shown was the enterprise funds that we have. And I asked the question whether or not the expenses for the enterprise fund is included in our financial policy for the cap or the ceiling and the floor on the fund balance account. And they said it was. So I was just curious on what, your thoughts are on including expenses on enterprise accounts that could potentially have huge expenses, but have revenues that offset it. So I'm just, Mary Power had mentioned that you guys were potentially looking at that. So I'm just curious, if we took those expenses out, what is the percentages of our current, what would our percentage of our current fund balance be?
It's an excellent question. It is a question we're looking at. Right now, the formula relates to the unrestricted fund balance as the numerator, and the total annual expenditures, which are basically defined as the amounts in Articles 4, 5, and 6, which include those enterprise funds, equals TAE. And our town accountant, who is not with us tonight, and others, this week we're discussing the same question. It's anticipated we're going to get guidance from the town financial advisors. We're going to determine whether that formula is in fact required by a general accounting standard. There is a general accounting standard that is referred to in the town financial policy. So if this is something that basically municipal accounting needs to be uniform on throughout cities and towns, we want to know that. I agree that it makes a big difference. I will tell you, I was giving a presentation on this year's warrant to the League of Women Voters this year, and I was looking at our past esteemed chair, Victor Baltera's slides from last year and a pie chart that indicated that school expenses were 49% of the town budget last year, and the pie chart this year said 46%. And I said, wow, that just can't be. It doesn't make any sense. The math is off. But it's because the water companies, $13 or $14 million was included this year and was not included last year. So I agree with you. It makes a big difference. Our financial policy is reviewed every 3 years, and we're going to do that review next year. And that's one of the questions that's going to be addressed.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Bob, and I would just point out that capital has a little bit of a different metric, which it's not total annual expenditures. It's actually the operating budget, which is the total annual expenditures less those enterprise funds and 2 other categories of debt and benefits. But so I would just point that out so that, that's all part of the discussion is, what's the proper,
Right.
metric and whatnot. So
Yeah. What
It's all part of the discussion. Yeah.
What's the right denominator? Priya Howell, are you back with us? Can you unmute yourself? We're still not hearing anything. Priya, I'm sorry, but we're not, we must have a communications error somewhere. Any other members of the general public that have a question at this point in time? If Priya solves her technology issue, we'll try to answer her question later. We had on the agenda tonight our general item about discussion of forecast, financial policy, fund balance and override, etc. There is a new tax planning tool that I circulated this afternoon. It's also available on the town website so that you can actually put in your individual piece of property and determine how the different inputs into the planning tool would affect personal taxes. So anybody in the town can do that. It is 20 minutes of 11. I know that my stamina is flagging. I'd assume that that other people may be in the same position. We're obviously going to have ongoing discussions about all of those financial items. Tom Mayo is with us tonight. He has indicated a willingness to answer questions. So if somebody had a question on any of those topics beyond what's already been asked, won't be your last opportunity, but I don't.
Well, no, you know what, Bob? I always say something, so I'm going to say something. I do appreciate that we've uploaded tools to the website. I think that's terrific. And I think you could go in and play with it until your eyes pop out of your head. It still does not address what are we trying to solve for. So until you understand what you're trying to solve for, the tools are fairly useless.
I think I've heard that before.
You have, and I will continue to say it.
Okay, understood.
And I've answered that before, or at least had a retort, which is, we know we have to balance the budget, but we also need to understand the impacts of how, for this year and in the future, for how we balance the budget. So therefore, we have a problem that we need to solve, and we have a tool that will allow us to understand the impacts of how we determine that solution. So I feel like it's a little bit of Groundhog Day, but I feel like that's, you know.
It is, Libby. It is.
Yeah,
It is. I know, Evan.
I'm going to respectfully suggest that if there is something really new that we haven't already talked about.
Is there a middle finger emotion on the reaction button here that I can put up, Bob?
George, would you strike that from the record? Priya Howell, are you back with us?
Okay, I'm going to try one more time.
Okay, we can hear you now.
Okay, Priya Howell, 26 Del Pratt. Sorry, I don't know why it wasn't working, but I switched to my phone. And thank you for recognizing me 3 times. I just wanted to say that I actually think, the town administrator's budget requests are really important, and they are worthy of being funded. And in my brief time interacting with the town's departments and my role as the chair of the Tree Preservation Study Committee, it's been clear to me how busy Tom and Michelle and Mary Savage Denham was when she was here. And I would support requests like an additional assistant town administrator and senior planner. And I'd also support investing in an additional social worker for our police department, because I think that police departments should have someone that is equipped to deal with mental health crises. That shouldn't just be left to the police officers to be the only ones to respond in those situations. So I feel that what we really need to do is grow our revenues so that we can provide the services that the residents of the town expect, including these. But we haven't received a commitment yet from our select board that they're going to pursue an override. And without an override, we can't fund these needs and we can't fund the additional requests for a recovery budget from the school. And although I support these, it's really our children that are legally entitled to a free and appropriate education. And Dr. Austin has said, without mincing words, that the recovery budget is what we need, not what we would like, but what we need to meet the needs of our students post-pandemic. So I urge the AdCom, as you get into the forecast next, to recommend that any surplus go first to the schools. And then I hope that our select board will pursue an override to raise the funds needed both for the town municipal departments and the school department.
Thank you, Priya. Any other, Evan, are you raising your hand?
No, I was still hoping that was a different emoji.
Okay, Mr. Corbett?
Hi, Greg Corbett, 70 Winter Street. A quick question for Mr. Mayo, and I apologize if I missed this earlier. I just wanted clarification on the town administrator's budget. How much is being funded by fund balance, and then how much of that is for non-capital costs? That makes sense.
So as I said, all of these recommendations that I presented tonight, Mr. Corbett, were removed from the forecast. So as of right now, there's no proposed funding for any of them. Does that make sense?
Because they were removed from the forecast.
From the forecast. And as we get into meetings here over the next couple of weeks, we'll start to determine which of these are should be funded and then how.
Are you okay with that? I mean, one of the big pieces, Mr. Corbett, is how the federal money is going to be handled. And, all options will be reviewed and explored. And we will be making a decision within the next 2 or 3 weeks.
No, I understand the answer. Thank you.
Okay. Any other member of the public? Anything? Are we okay to go on to minutes? Does anyone else have anything to ask about the financial items? I don't see anybody, so I want to thank you, Tom, and thank you, Michelle, for spending an evening with us.
It was fun.
Hope you come back again.
And Tom, maybe we'll get to see your presentation before you remove them from the forecast next time.
What we do every year, Evan.
Yep.
And okay, George
Thank
has
you all.
graced us.
Good night.
Good night. George has graced us with minutes from March 4th. They've been distributed. George has provided a red line that for everybody's review. Does anyone have any further comments or suggested revisions?
Bob, I suggest that the article and discussion should have the amount that was actually set forth by Mr. Garrity last week. Seems to be a pretty critical piece of the discussion.
I agree with you, Victor, and if I didn't provide a comment to George to that effect, I meant to.
Actually, Bob, you did include a comment. You took out the amount because I had it in my original set. So I can put something back in.
Yeah, I don't remember taking Bob Garrity's number out because I thought that was important to be in there.
Yeah.
But I'll look back.
Yeah.
Maybe
All right.
I'm losing it.
We will,
So is-
I'll add it back in.
Any other suggested revisions? Yeah, if not, I'd take a motion to move to approve the minutes with the revision to be made.
So moved.
Moved. Second.
All right, Dave?
Aye.
Andy?
Aye.
Brenda?
Aye.
Daveline?
Aye.
Julie?
Aye.
George?
Aye.
Kristen?
Aye.
Alan?
Aye.
Victor? You woke me up.
Enthusiastic.
Aye.
Thanks. Erin?
Aye.
Nancy?
Aye.
Evan?
Aye.
Libby?
Aye.
Okay. I think Julie has a quick liaison report or warrant article update on Article M, the community preservation.
Well, at the risk of talking about this article yet again and getting yelled at by Andy, I just wanted to let you know that the Bear Cove Park Committee had a meeting last night, and I attended, as well as Larry Lindner, the chair of the CPC, and we discussed the project and explained the 10-4 vote of no action by the advisory committee. And Larry also explained his view that he felt like the project should not go, the project should be removed from the warrant this year. So it was a good conversation. I think that the committee still has a lot of outstanding questions about what project they want to put forward first. You know, they wanted to work on a pavilion. They wanted to work on the museum there. So it was a good conversation that they still have some work to do. So they're going to regroup. Well, they took a vote and they voted 6-1 to ask the Community Preservation Committee to remove this project from the Article M. So the CPC is going to, and I'll add that they want to come back for another day with the bathroom, Andy. So don't lose hope.
One more, can you hold?
But anyway, so the CPC is meeting next Wednesday, and they're going to take an official vote because they're the ones who have the authority to remove that project from the warrant, because they were the ones who it's their article. Any questions?
So if the CPC votes to remove it, it's just going to disappear from the comment and the recommended motion.
Town council said that it would disappear from the article itself too.
Oh, all right. Okay.
So he said, you know, my question is at the Bear Cove Park, the accounting of what they, the Community Preservation Committee, the accounting would be that they'd basically be in the positive for $68,000. So I figured I would, that money, since wouldn't be spent on this project, it would just go back into the CPA general fund. But I don't know, I guess I have to decide whether it should be accounted for in the comment that they'll have a surplus.
It might change a surplus number, but I don't know that the comment needs to deal in any extensive way with it.
Okay. It won't be in the recommended motion either, the project.
Any other liaison reports? And looks like we'll be meeting Tuesday and Thursday next week. The end of March is coming, and people will have some time off. Daveline, I know we had the policies and procedures review on for tonight. I'm going to suggest that in view of the hour that we might want to put that on for Tuesday.
Brilliant idea.
That's fine.
Okay. Any matters not anticipated within 48 hours? I'd accept the motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Dave?
Aye.
Andy,
Aye.
Brenda,
Aye.
Eveline,
Aye.
Julie,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Kristen,
Aye.
Alan,
Aye.
Victor,
Aye.
Aaron,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Evan,
Aye.
Libby.
Aye.
Great, Tina,
Aye.
thank you.